This episode of Xbox Arsenal is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support the Boss Rush family of podcasts, head to bossrush.net or our Patreon at patreon.com/bossrushmedia. Thanks for helping us build something better. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Xbox Arsenal podcast here on Boss Rush Games. I'm one of your hosts, Corey Dirrig, and alongside me for this new journey into the world of Xbox. Really an old journey, revived, I guess, is none other than Josh Finney.
Oh man, I was bracing for all the nicknames, but yes,
I know we got to build up to that. You know,
The people aren't ready for it right away.
Yeah, look, the Tower Casuals audience knows. Okay, they know. But this audience may not know.
They may not. They, in fact, may not.
Yeah. I'm expecting an influx of old and new listeners to this. So for those of you who know us, you know that we used to do the Arsenal X podcast together with a few others. And then, life got busy and other things happened. And, Josh and I do a Destiny podcast together. But for those of you that don't know, Josh and I do a podcast together. And this is now our second podcast together.
We really like talking about Xbox.
Yeah, I think we like talking about it so much though that the Destiny podcast people are like, shut up, just stop talking. Stop.
Yeah,
talking.
I think after like the last 2 months or so, I think that they're starting to get tired of hearing about non-Destiny titles, about hearing either Zelda and Diablo and Final Fantasy. Really, let's journey with Josh as he plays things other than Destiny for the summer.
Pretty much. And then,
God help everyone during summer showcase season.
Yeah. Also, I really wish Destiny was available to play during the times that I log in, because
oh my God,
sure isn't.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like our new idea that we want to talk about Xbox. We are aiming for an every other week cadence at this point. And then if the audience wants it, we'll reevaluate it. If the listenership's there, we'll reevaluate it. But this is our every other week Xbox podcast where we're just going to talk about Xbox. Josh, how do you feel about this? This was kind of what we came up with initially.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to do a console specific podcast in 2023 on an every week basis to cover like any topic in the broader gaming community every week is a challenge. We've kind of run into that with Destiny. After initially saying that was going to be an every other week thing, and then it was like, oh shit, we had so much for so many years, and we've hit like a dry spell for the first time ever in 3 years of doing that show, and it's kind of been an awakening. I think if you have like an established audience, for example, on Nintendo Power Block, you have an audience that is there every week expecting a show.
Yeah,
and regardless, you've got like 40 years with Nintendo to pull from, right?
Yeah.
With Xbox, I think it's a little bit more challenging. Like right now, they're in the news a lot, but Xbox likes to go really quiet at times too.
Yeah.
As we've seen with, the AAA titles, with that fiasco, and, we can't always be having acquisition season. So eventually there's just stuff that's not to talk about. And also, not everything is worth talking about or interesting to talk about. So I think, doing an every other week approach is pretty sensible for, if you're covering one of the major platforms in today's day and age and you don't already have a big established audience.
Yeah. Yeah, and it also comes down to scheduling and stuff too. Like I'm really trying to condense my schedule to only record on like Monday, Wednesday, Thursday for our podcasts, right? And there's a lot of I had to really move a lot of stuff around and reschedule a lot of like stuff that we're doing to fit that schedule. And this is something that I think you and I are both passionate enough about to move our schedules around to make it happen every other week. So I'm glad we're doing this. I think kind of a kind of a good week to start an Xbox podcast, I guess.
Oh my
Coming off,
god. Yeah, coming off like the most news-filled week outside of Summer Showcase in the last year.
yeah. So I'm also, if you're listening to this is the first episode, obviously, of the True podcast. I'm also going to put the Boss Rush extras where Josh and I talked about the showcase and everything else on here, just to kind of give I guess, like an episode 0 to fill the feed, to
Mhm.
make it out there. So, yeah. So everybody in the Boss Rush community, welcome to an Xbox show. If you are not part of the Boss Rush community, you just found this because you are looking for Xbox content because you're excited for the future of Xbox, welcome. I'm hoping that you enjoy our little show here. So, Josh, is there anything else you want to say before we kind of get started? I mean, should we introduce ourselves? I feel like enough people
I feel
know
like
who we
enough
are,
people
but
know us at this point. They
yeah,
definitely know you.
yeah. Well, they know
And
you
I've
too.
been around. I've been around enough.
Yeah. So, if you don't know who we are, find something else we've been we've been on.
Tower Casuals every Thursday night.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, Josh, since we're kind of going in here talking about Xbox before we kind of dive in, so I think this opening show is kind of be kind of like we're gonna talk a lot about the FTC hearing with
Yeah.
Microsoft, right? That's pretty much the entire show, and we're gonna find some sort of cadence to fall into in terms of, like, you know, the structure of the show and everything. We have a doc, but, like, you know, we never really follow a doc on Tower Casuals, so we
No.
might figure out a different cadence here as well. But, you know, we might talk about a little bit about what we're playing, but we're going to be more about what's happening in Xbox and say what we're playing. You know, maybe we'll do like a 5-minute segment of what we're playing. But other than that, I think we're just going to talk a lot about the news and answer questions if we have any. I think that's the goal of this show. I think so many people spend too much time talking about what they've been playing, right? That I don't know. I feel like a lot of people kind of talk about the same things all the time. So, Josh, are you playing anything interesting that you want to talk about before we, besides Diablo and
No,
Final Fantasy?
I'm very close to rolling credits on Final Fantasy. I'm probably about 4 or 5 hours from the end right now. Finishing up the last batch of side quests and stuff on the hunt board right now, and then I'll be done. So outside of that, not really. This has actually been a shockingly low key game week for me.
Ooh,
I have not been playing very much at all. But I'm preparing to dive into the backlog. It's funny, we're doing an Xbox show, right? It's the beginning of an Xbox show, and I'm getting ready to dive into my PlayStation
yeah.
backlog over the next
Way
month.
to open up with a PlayStation exclusive there, Josh.
I know, world premiere.
World premiere
Yeah, I'm
exclusive.
play it not on Xbox Series X. I'll be playing through a lot of games that have come to PS Plus that I haven't gotten to yet over the last couple years, due to lots of destinying and things of that nature. I hope to roll credits on Tears of the Kingdom at some point in the next month. But really, it's just kind of like we're on the march towards Starfield right now.
Yep.
We got 7 weeks to go, I think,
Something like that.
and yeah, 6 or 7 weeks until early access. And oh man, I am. That date is just looming large in my mind right now. That's a very busy week.
Yeah.
And that being Starfield effectively being moved up a week made an already busy week busier.
Mm-hmm.
So no, it's kind of the march towards that. Baldur's Gate, Armored Core, those are all coming out in a
It's a
couple
busy
weeks span.
fall, and I still need to play Star Wars too.
Oh my
Jedi
goodness,
Survivor.
I love Jedi Survivor. It's probably my favorite story of the year so far
Yeah.
in a game. I say that with the caveat of I have not finished Tears of the Kingdom, but
Yeah.
it's probably my favorite. It's my favorite Star Wars story in a game
Mm-hmm.
since Knights of the Republic, and I feel like that's kind of the common thought here.
Yeah.
Um,
Man, I still Republic, man, so good.
it's so good.
I wonder if it holds up because I truly haven't played it since the original Xbox.
So I played it. Oh God, probably about 4 or 5 years ago. When I went to Celebration in 2019, they gave a free Xbox copy of it, a free backwards compatible digital copy to everyone who was at the reveal of Jedi Fallen Order.
Ooh.
Whether you were watching it or you were there in the arena, they gave you a copy of it. If you were there at the viewing of it, you also got 3 months of Xbox Live given to you.
Ooh.
So that was a Game Pass hadn't quite it was a thing, but it hadn't taken off just yet.
Ooh.
So we were still getting Xbox. That's when it and Xbox Live Gold were still separate for like another month. But I mean, outside of that, no. That's like Jedi Survivor is like it's fighting to stay in my top 5 right now. But I've really enjoyed it this year. And I think that's a testament that that's not the front runner. Just how strong the first 6 months were.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like. I was like when they announced that remake. When Aspire, obviously that's not happening really anymore. I mean, new studio probably be re-revealed at some point, but like that trailer was awesome, and I was like really upset when they were like, this remake isn't really what it's going to be.
It was so funny when that got announced. I was on vacation with our mutual friend, one of my very dear close friends, Ray Apollo. Him and his wife went on vacation with my girlfriend and I. We were at Disney World when that whole PlayStation Presents was airing, and we were just like, we're losing our minds over each game. We're like, oh my god, like these games look so good. And then they do KOTOR, and he was like, oh my god, KOTOR, and I was just like, I refuse to get excited for this because it's not going to come out. It's just straight up not going to come out. Like we'd been hearing the Aspire rumors for like a year and a half at this point.
Yeah,
I've been hearing them even longer without a studio attached. I was like, dude, it's not going to happen. There's a reason why this is not coming to Xbox, and it's not simply because Sony paid more money. It's Phil Spencer didn't want this on their console.
Yeah,
he didn't want them to be associated with it, and yeah. That is one of those games that like I think it holds up because if you played it, it's such a classic.
Yeah.
But if you didn't play it back in the day, you're gonna be like, oh my god, this thing is such a slog. Kind of like trying to go play Morrowind for the first time in 2023.
Yeah.
Like, okay, these are the games I want to see get remade, not Assassin's Creed Black Flag.
I know. I saw that. I'm like, why?
10 years ago.
Why?
Yeah, like, but why?
Look, I love Black Flag. I'm a defender of that game, but like we don't need a remake, especially if you're having that studio's having so much trouble with Skull and Bones already. Like, why would you?
Dude, don't forget about the Sands of Time remake that's just disappeared seemingly.
I know. Don't worry, we're getting a cooler Prince of Persia game though. So
we're getting the superior Prince of Persia game.
TBD on that, but hopefully it looks cool. That game looks awesome, by the way.
Also,
Sands of Time already on Xbox, backwards compatible. So Warrior Within or Two Thrones. So
is that I was about to say, is that the only one that's backwards compatible, or are Warrior Within and Two Thrones on there too?
No, the Warrior Within and Two Thrones are not, but the one that came out around the same time as the movie that was actually pretty good and nobody cared about.
Yeah. Just the generic Prince of Persia titled game.
No, Forgotten Sands.
Oh, Forgotten Sands. Gotcha.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Which is like Sands of Time 1.5, sort of. It's like a sequel to Sands of Time, but takes place before Warrior Within, supposedly.
Man, I always forget that the Prince of Persia movie exists, and Disney Plus reminds me every so often.
I know.
It's like, oh my god! Not only did I forget that this movie exists, I forgot that Disney bankrolled it.
Yeah,
and it's just such a weird thing because I saw that movie one time, and I never thought about it again. I walked out of that movie theater, and I just forgot that it existed.
Yeah, I watched it, and I was like, it wasn't bad, and it wasn't good. And
it came out when I was graduating high school. It came out like the weekend I graduated high school. One of the girls that I was friends with was and still is a huge gamer, was super big into Final Fantasy, Prince of Persia style games. Like, I know those are two radically different things, but those are the type of games she was into. Nobody else, like, in our little group really was. Like, we were all 17. We were into Halo and Modern Warfare and Guitar Hero and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I played Final Fantasy 12, and I had played the Prince of Persia games. That was what she decided she wanted to do for her grad party. was just like 8 of us go see it. And her and I swear, we were the only ones who did not fall asleep and who were actually happy to be there. And I still cannot tell you a lick of what happened in that movie. No. It's just, and yet somehow it's one of the most competently made video game movies.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree.
That's how bad the bar is here.
Here's the thing. Remember, I mean, it's a little bit of a side tangent. Remember when Disney didn't own Marvel or Star Wars and they were doing things like Prince of Persia and John Carter from Mars and like all these weird...
Oh God, then remember how they all bombed?
Tomorrowland. Yeah, dude. Like it was...
Oh God,
and then they're like,
so
we can't do this outside of our...
Do you remember Eddie Murphy in the Haunted Mansion?
Yeah. Did you know the Haunted Mansion comes out in like 2 weeks? The new one?
Okay. This is not Xbox related. Who decided that was a good idea? You're putting this out a week after Barbie and Oppenheimer, 2 weeks after Mission Impossible, and 3 months before Halloween.
Yeah.
At least release this at like the end of September.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they just want it out so like it can hit streaming by then? ?
Maybe, but also like...
And that movie looks legitimately fun.
Yeah, it does, but like it's like... Who asked for this? I feel like this is like one of those movies that should have gone straight to Disney Plus at some point. That's what it feels like, because it feels like that Lady and the Tramp remake. It feels like the Peter Pan thing that they did a couple months ago. Like,
did they actually remake Lady and the Tramp?
Yeah, it was a Disney Plus launch movie.
Listen, Disney Plus launched with Mando, okay? I did not pay attention to anything else that premiered once Mando was a thing.
I mean, that's fair.
So, yeah, wow. Again, we're talking about things I forgot existed. That Peter Pan movie came out 2 months ago, and I've already forgotten that exists. And it's from a director that I like.
Yeah. And, like, it has big names in it. Jude Law is Captain Hook. It was like, oh my gosh, what are you doing?
I don't need to continually see live-action versions of my favorite characters from my childhood.
Well, it's Disney, so you're going to.
Yeah, I'm just so excited to see Moana get remade, even though it came out like 6 years ago.
Yeah, but the thing is like they're using the same actors. Like the girl that played Moana is playing Moana, right?
Gross.
So, I mean, I don't know. I have kids, so my view is a little bit different. Moana's
you're gonna watch it whether you like it or not. I can at least ignore it.
Yeah. But my daughter likes Moana a lot, so it's happening. But enough of this. Enough.
This is already a Corey and Josh show. We've already gone into a tangent.
I know. Oh, wait till we talk about Star Wars. By the way, you saw Indiana Jones, right?
I did.
Did you like it?
I loved it.
Great. That's all I needed.
It's better than Crystal Skull, not as good as the trilogy. But there are so many moments where I'm like, this is classic indie.
Yeah.
I mean, the entire 20-minute opening sequence is amazing.
Is it?
I was so happy. I was so happy the whole time.
Man.
I've seen people criticize the third act, and I'm like, have you guys never watched the climax of an Indiana Jones movie before? He literally met aliens in the last one. So, Guardian of the Holy Grail, the people's faces melting off in the presence of the Ark. You guys not remember what happens here?
Right.
I don't know. It was good. It was good fun. I look forward to watching it again. I will actually buy it when it comes out. I did not buy Crystal Skull. Yeah. And I have not bought the trilogy ever because you can't buy it without Crystal Skull.
Yeah. I think I'll end up getting the 4K box set of all 5 movies when it comes out, because I'm sure there's going to be the bonus discs of the making of the original trilogy. Here's the making of this. Here's interview. All that kind of stuff. And Indiana Jones.
Yeah, I would be okay with that.
And Indiana Jones,
Crystal Skull is a coaster.
Yeah, and Last Crusade is a top 3 movie of mine.
I love Last Crusade.
I love Last Crusade. I love Raiders too, and technically I think Raiders is probably a better movie.
It is.
But Last Crusade is my favorite movie.
I mean, there's a difference between being the best and being your favorite, though.
Yeah, I know.
So, for me, Empire is the best Star Wars, but it's not my favorite.
Yeah. Man, but yeah, man, my goal is when we move and we get a house, I'm gonna the first thing I want to buy besides like a whatever I we have money for is like a Last Crusade movie poster to hang up in some sort of
Yeah.
office. So they're not cheap though.
No, things like that have gotten really expensive. Like novelty things have gotten pricey.
Yeah. But anyway, Josh, we're not here to talk about Disney and Indiana Jones, and as much as I would like to, actually, we might talk about Indiana Jones later.
No, I mean we will be. It was in the court filings, so
We're here. By the way, before we get into that, I've been playing Planet of Lana on Game Pass.
how is that? I've been looking forward to it for so long, and I feel really bad I haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I'm
Might
enjoying it.
be my next game after
It's
Final
like
Fantasy.
it's like it reminds me of Limbo and Inside if those games had colors.
This is published by Thunderful, who is another company we're going to be talking about a little bit.
Yeah, but it's fun. The puzzles are fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's relatively simple side scroller, but it's cute. It's fun. I'm enjoying it.
So, I've heard great things.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it definitely, the opening is pretty touching and pretty like sad, and then like the whole quest is for you to go. It's not really a spoiler, but the whole quest is like you're going after these robots have invaded the planet, and you're going to search for your sister, who got kidnapped by these robots, aliens, things. So,
robot alien things.
Yeah. So I haven't decided which one it is yet. It might be both. It might be aliens driving the robots. So, but I recommend it. It's on Game Pass. We should also consider maybe in future episodes doing like a Game Pass pick of the week.
We should. That is our first one. That's our first one.
Yeah. So that's good. I like it. But Josh, this FTC thing, man, it's I'm seeing a bunch of like it's definitely going through and a lot of it's definitely not going through, and I don't know who's watching what. It definitely feels like, to me, reading like I was following a Tom Warren's Verge article the whole time. I know there's other sources out there, and I watch a couple videos like Randall Thor 19's. I watched his video, although I think he's a little bit more of a Xbox fan about it as opposed to like maybe looking at it in detail. Although it's not a bad video, I'm just trying to be.
Yeah, I followed Tom Warren's blog about it, but and he probably had the best running blog about it. I mean, the man gets paid to cover this. The two that I was following who were watching it like really closely were Steven Totillo over at Axios and Rebecca Valentine at IGN.
Yeah.
Rebecca's like really, for me, kind of picked up that like Jason Schreier torch of investigative journalism.
Yeah, she's definitely
she's outstanding.
Yeah, I very rarely kind of go to IGN anymore really for things, but she's definitely one that I kind of follow. Also, before we move on, Josh, I wanna go on the record and say that this is an Xbox podcast. We're going to focus on the Xbox side of things, but we're also going to look at it from a critical standpoint and from a observational standpoint. And also, we are not lawyers by any sense. So any legal things, just, know that Josh and I are not in the legal field. So we're kind of approaching that from that kind of angle.
Yeah, we're approaching from that angle and just like kind of taking into account like what people who actually know what they're talking about have said. And I think like the most important thing to realize going into this is that nobody knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
This is not a night and day case. I think that most people can agree that outside of the cloud gaming argument, the FTC really doesn't have too much of a case, just as a broad overview.
Yeah.
It's a little silly. And as the judge basically said in closing arguments, it was always about Call of Duty. Like, this is just, it's coming down to Call of Duty. It was always about this. And that was essentially what Microsoft's closing argument was too. But Judge Corley. She
Mhm.
said, word for word, this case has always been about Call of Duty, and that's been the source of Jim Ryan's objection and SIE's objection to this from the beginning has always been Call of Duty. Like
Mhm.
they have not raised any, at least public, concerns about Blizzard, about King, about cloud gaming, nothing. And that's why, like, when the CMA went to block this several weeks ago, it was really surprising that they did it on the basis of cloud gaming because just a few weeks prior, like back in April, they were objecting to it on monopolization arguments over Call of Duty.
Mhm.
And for cloud to like kind of be the thing that they come out swinging about when the EU would raise some concerns, but they're like, hey, they've more than satisfied our concerns.
Yeah.
It's just it's really funny to see that, like, and that they didn't, the FTC didn't even like pivot to cloud until like with a day and a half to go, maybe. And even then, it really didn't get addressed. Very little of this was actually about cloud, but if Judge Corley was going to grant the injunction, it's going to be on that basis.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think they both sides. Well, PlayStation and Xbox kind of came at it as like, look, cloud. Jim Ryan said cloud isn't even going to be ready until close to 2025 at least, and Microsoft came out and said that xCloud kind of became more of a feature and didn't take off how they expected.
Yeah.
And so, like, which is fine. I'm glad that that's kind of the route they're going, seemingly.
Mm.
If this case is to be believed, right? Like, I don't mind cloud gaming for something like I played a lot of Gears Tactics, right, in cloud
Yeah.
gaming. But like you and I are both big Destiny fans, that's not really a game you want to be playing over the cloud, right? Not that it's on Game
Yeah.
Pass, but so I'm glad like if it's becoming a feature for Ultimate members and not something that they're really focusing on.
For me, it's the same thing that I've been saying since kind of the beginning. Like, it's a really cool feature. I personally like using it. I use it within my own home, but
Mm-hmm.
when I travel, that's different. Like at home, I have gigabit fiber,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I have a pretty good Wi-Fi connection, I would say. But when I travel, that's completely different. That's when I would want to be using it. The infrastructure just isn't there yet.
Yeah.
We're probably like 4 or 5 years away from it being a widespread thing where you are playing major AAA games like Starfield over the
Mm-hmm.
cloud.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Like I like that Microsoft made the pivot to go after this because we've said this before on previous shows. But if you look at what each of the big three does, they each have something that they focus on now. With Sony, they've made the push into VR, right?
Yeah.
That's the niche that they're trying to conquer. Microsoft, or excuse me, Nintendo has portability on lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
They have the portability and the hybrid console. They proved that could actually work.
Yeah.
An actual powerful handheld could work.
Yeah.
So Microsoft, like, kind of naturally needed to find theirs, and theirs has been in subscriptions and they're trying to make it in cloud also. And how hilarious is it that subscriptions are slowing and that cloud is not taking off? Like, this is just classic, you're in third place, this is going to happen to you type
Yeah.
scenarios.
Yeah. Which was kind of like a worry when Game Pass first came around, and then they announced that don't get me wrong, Xbox had to use this because they were struggling, but like they can't go back now, right? Of putting their first party games on this thing, right? They,
um
I mean,
I
that
mean,
was
I actually would not go that far. I think anything is possible. I do think that we eventually could get to a point where they say we're going to exempt certain games from Game Pass. I mean, that was one of my questions a couple of years ago when we talked about Indiana Jones earlier. When the Indiana Jones game was announced, could it be a stipulation in the contract with Disney, if Disney had amended it, that hey, we'll let you keep this exclusive, but this cannot be on Game Pass?
yeah,
That would have been one of the only games that I would have sat there and wondered, because, like, also, what if you strike a deal to make a game kind of like Spider-Man? Well,
yeah,
is that third party conglomerate going to allow you to do that, or are they going to say we need a portion of Game Pass profits for like the first 3 months?
yeah,
So some people are going to flock to play our game.
yeah. My other thought too was like, well, they're buying publishers now, right? I mean, obviously Bethesda, and then ABK now. my original thought was like, well, Xbox Game Studios games will be on Game Pass, but
Yes.
maybe they'll still sell Bethesda games, and obviously Starfield's going to be on Game Pass, so maybe my theory was wrong. But like Activision Blizzard games, they'll still sell, or
I
they'll
think
come to Game Pass later.
yeah. So for me, the thing is, they might not be there day one, but they'll be there within like 6 to 12 months, kind of like the EA Play deal.
Yeah.
I do think that you're going to see a shift at some point in lieu of a price hike.
Mm-hmm.
I could very much see it being like, hey, Elder Scrolls 6 is not going to come to Game Pass day one.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to pay for this. If you want to wait, you can. And I don't even think they'll phrase it like that, right? But it'll kind of be like this attitude of, you can wait, but do you really want to wait another year on Elder Scrolls 6?
Yeah.
And I think the overwhelming answer is going to be no.
Yeah. I mean, I think people will be mad at first, but people will buy it.
Oh, they'll be really mad. But that's still like, according to Phil Spencer, that's like 4 or 5 years away.
Yeah.
So, like, we're coming up on end of the generation at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder
how does Game Pass change over the next 4 to 5 years,
Yeah.
And a lot of that starts here with the decisions made this week.
Yeah. I wonder how that would would they launch the next console with it? Would that be a good time to change? Hey, we're shifting and move. Like, Xbox is popular enough now, so we're shifting some of these games off of Game Pass to sell first, and then it'll be there later. Like,
I think it all depends on how the business goes for like probably the next 18 to 24 months.
mm-hmm.
My guess would be like, as it stands right now, I don't think they need to do that. But Satya Nadella has said that it has to continue to be profitable somehow. That he has told Phil Spencer, this has to continue to be profitable.
Mm-hmm.
And the division has to be somehow. And right now they still are. But part of the spending on Activision Blizzard is to ensure that they stay profitable, because you still have the money coming in from World of Warcraft and the money coming in from Diablo. Diablo is a mega hit.
Yeah.
King generates like $1 billion in revenue a year.
Yeah.
And then, over on the ZeniMax side, part of the motivation for that purchase surely is ESO.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say anything of their traditional single player games, which sell 15 million copies without blinking.
Yeah.
I think Fallout 4 was like the least impressive one they've released in the last 10 to 15 years. And that was still something that sold 20 million copies, I think.
Yeah.
So, like, even 76 still generates, profitability, and still was like the 6th best selling game the year that it came out, purely on name alone.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think when you have things like that are profitable, that allows you to take the greater creative risks. Like Josh Sawyer's talked about how Pentiment probably doesn't get made if they aren't bought by Microsoft, if Obsidian is not purchased.
Right. And I would assume the same, like Grounded, obviously, I don't know, would have been, I mean, it could have been made, but probably in a different, it probably wouldn't be up to the quality that it is.
From what I understand, that game was going into pre-production when Microsoft bought them.
Mm-hmm.
But they hadn't even started looking for publishers yet. But he was like, this is like, him and Tim Schafer have talked about it. And I believe that, oh God, who is it? The guys over at In Exile, I'm completely forgetting the studio head's name over there, have said that they have more freedom to do whatever they want to do now. Like, they're not having to go out and do Kickstarters and like beg publishers. Do what?
Brian Fargo.
That's who I'm thinking of.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
They don't have to run out and beg for money anymore. That there's money there. Like we've all heard the Tim Schafer story at this point about Psychonauts 2, about how they had cut all the boss battles, trying to make a deadline, trying to get the game finally out the door. And when Phil Spencer saw it for the first time after they purchased Double Fine, he was like, "Where are the boss battles?" And Tim's like, "Oh, we kind of cut it." And he's like, "What else have you cut from the game? Like, I want you to make your game. I'm fine with this being delayed if it's your creative vision."
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's the biggest. I think that's the biggest thing, is that you're allowed creative autonomy and you're allowed to do what you want to do. Like, you look at something, one of the pieces of information we got out of this is that Ninja Theory, when they were purchased in 2018, were purchased for $117 million. And look at the work they're doing with Hellblade 2. We can ignore Bleeding Edge, but like look at Hellblade alone, like Hellblade and then Hellblade 2, but like they sold for that little because Hellblade was just kind of an out of nowhere hit.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at a lot of the studios, when you remove Activision Blizzard from this, and really when you remove both publishers that they've either acquired or trying to acquire, the studios they've bought are ones that are traditionally were either already aligned with Xbox, such as Playground and Undead Labs, or they're ones that were really struggling for funding and publishing. No matter how talented, like everybody likes Double Fine and Obsidian games, but the truth is they were really struggling to get funding there. So, like, at what point do we say, like, yeah, this is really, really good for these individual game developers? And, like, I think that's, we're about to get into the Activision Blizzard of it all. I think that's what annoys me about this acquisition.
Yeah.
Is it's so antithetical of what they've done so far. Like, the Bethesda one, okay, like, the board wanted to sell, specifically the founder of ZeniMax wanted to sell. He, before he passed away, he wanted to sell. I believe they talked about it in the announcement video after it got approved by the FTC that he had wanted to sell before he passed. He had passed away just before the deal was completed, but he wanted the company taken care of. Mm-hmm. We've heard Todd talk about how when 76 was such a disaster and it launched, the first call he made was to Phil Spencer. What do I do? How do I, like, I've never done a live service game. How do we rebound from this?
Yeah.
Activision's such a weird thing because it's such a big entity. I mean, it's like if somebody just decided they were going to go buy EA.
Yeah.
They own the most popular brand in the world in gaming with Call of Duty. They own so many of the biggest PC brands, Diablo, Warcraft, StarCraft has kind of diminished. Overwatch was a juggernaut in the last decade.
Mm-hmm.
Hearthstone once ruled mobile gaming. Like, there's all these IP that come with that. And then, I mean, what retiree hasn't played Candy Crush? So,
right. I mean, even my mom's played Candy Crush. And
yeah, I mean, like, we all played it when we were teenagers, and somehow that game is still being published, 15 years later. Yeah. But you look at all of these and it's like, okay, from the broader portfolio standpoint, I can understand it, but it just goes so against what I think the goal was in 2018 and 2019 with acquiring these smaller studios that were struggling with funding for, here we go. We're only going after mega publishers now.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that's been, to circle this back around to the trial, that's one of the things that's trying to be proven is, well, they're going to do the same thing with these games as they did with Bethesda. And, we saw the email from Pete Hines basically going like, what the hell, guys? Like, so Starfield and Elder Scrolls are going to be exclusives, but they're going to let Call of Duty remain on PlayStation, like, and Blizzard properties. Like, that doesn't feel right. It's like, well, it kind of does, though. Like, I laughed really hard when the FTC's lawyers tried to make the case that Elder Scrolls is as big as Call of Duty. Nothing except for Grand Theft Auto and Minecraft is as big as Call of Duty. Yeah. In terms of, like, monthly active users. Nothing in the world is as popular as that.
Right. Yeah. This is, I wonder if this does go through, how does this, this obviously kicks the door wide open for Sony to make a move, but I mean, do you think they would make a move on someone? Do you think Microsoft is done acquiring studios?
Microsoft's not done acquiring studios. I say this with all the respect in the world for what Phil Spencer is doing over there. They have to be done with publishers if this goes through. Mm-hmm. I'm already like, I'm very pessimistic about this acquisition anyways. Mm-hmm. And I know, like, as an Xbox fan,
I mean, we were initially, right? I mean, you were initially when we first talked about this, almost 2 years ago? A year ago?
18 months ago.
Yeah.
But 18 months ago. I was pretty against it from the beginning.
Yeah.
I think it's too much. This is the best comparison I can draw is I think this is similar to Disney acquiring Fox. Mm-hmm. I think it's a problem. But unlike that, I don't think this creates a monopoly. But I do think that that's too much. Like, especially now that we're starting to see the fruits of the labors of these studios that they acquired a couple of years ago. And we're like, well, damn, like, in the next 18 months, you're going to have Starfield. You're presumably going to have Fable. You're going to have South of Midnight. You're going to have Clockwork Revolution. You're going to have Avowed. The strategy is starting to bear that fruit.
Mm-hmm.
It took a long time for us to get here, but like 2021 was kind of a taste of it too, right? Like Psychonauts 2 is the biggest game that Double Fine's ever made, and like look how good that was. That was
Mm-hmm.
probably my game of the year that year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Age of Empires 4 was really good. Gears Tactics was really good. Flight Sim is really good. Like those were examples of working with outside studios. Forza Horizon 5 was a mega hit.
Mm-hmm.
Like these teams can Halo Infinite, despite what you may think about the content roadmap, was pretty good at launch. Like I really dig the campaign. I really liked how the multiplayer felt. Just you needed more content there. But
Yeah.
they have shown there have been sparks there,
Mm-hmm.
with how they work with smaller studios too. Like 2020 was really bad in terms of AAA, but look at all the smaller games they released that year.
Yeah.
Minecraft Dungeons, tell me why. Gears Tactics came out that year too, excuse me. Even ones that didn't, like Grounded went into early access. You had a couple that, were misses. You had Battletoads and Bleeding Edge. You had Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Like, they kind of have it nailed when it comes to smaller teams and smaller studios. It's just like we got to get there on the AAA front. And I understand when you did the ZeniMax deal, that was in the midst of all these smaller games coming out. Like that was to boost your product, your output now and in the future, and get all
Mm-hmm.
these classic IP under your roof. Like we talked about it the night that was, or the day that was announced. We did an emergency pod that night.
Yeah, we did.
Because I was driving back from Austin at the time when this broke, and I stopped to get gas, and just my phone had been blowing up for the last hour, and I was like, okay, fine, I got to pull off. And I just sat there in a parking lot replying to everybody for close to an hour before I could get back on the road.
Yeah.
But it's like Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Doom, Wolfenstein, Quake, like all of that is now under, Dishonored, Prey, like everything is now under your roof. And that was before we knew about indie being in development.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of this is under your roof now. Like even then we were like, okay, they kind of got to hold off. You got so many talented teams coming in there. Like if you want to go for studios, I'm okay with that. I think with publishers, you have to stop. The public perception is not great around this.
Yeah.
For those of us who are like super into the space, it's like a line in the sand has been drawn, and it's like Nintendo fans are eating all the popcorn, but because there is nothing but benefits here from them if this goes through, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, for
But
sure.
you look at the hardcore fans on both sides, and it has introduced a new level of toxicity.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
we've gotten to a point in United States courts and in the rule of law where the words console wars have been uttered on an official record.
Yeah. It's government official.
Yeah, that's sad.
Gross.
It's gross. It's gross. I don't like when people are, and I get the irony of saying this when we're doing an Xbox show. I don't like people getting into like ride or die mode for billion-dollar corporations.
Yeah.
That's like that's really gross to me. That's like the worst aspect of capitalism that I can think of.
Yeah. I
Like
also
go okay, go ahead.
I also like, I know we don't want to rah-rah like billion-dollar corporations or anything, but
Yeah.
also like it really feels like Xbox has been the underdog because they, for the first, I mean, they didn't even really believe in the original Xbox, right? And then like the Xbox 360 was, kind of underfunded a little bit, and it wasn't until like the Xbox One that it just like, I mean, Phil had to convince Satya Nadella to keep the Xbox brand going, right? And it's like, I kind of almost feel like, yes, Microsoft is a mega corporation. They lead in so many different ways, but Xbox is like,
It's a footnote.
It's yeah, and I don't really care for that, and so like Xbox always feels like an underdog, because they're part of this corporation that kind of, they care, but it took a long time for them to care, and even so, like they're just now investing and building the stuff, and a lot of people are like, oh well, Xbox bought all their first party games, and it's like, well, you kind of have to when they entered, right, to at least compete, right? So
I mean, it's funny because you look back at some of the classic PlayStation studios, and those were bought back in their infancy, right? Yeah. Those became part of the team, but like even so, like you look at a studio like Insomniac, which is traditionally a PlayStation studio, got bought in 2016, 2017, somewhere in that area.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact. No, it was later than that. It was after Spider-Man, I believe. I want to say it was.
Then?
Yeah, I think it was after Microsoft bought the first handful of studios is when they announced that they had bought
Hmm.
Insomniac.
Yeah.
Sony did. And it's just, I see comments like that. It's really funny because like I think back to like the history of Naughty Dog, and
Hmm.
like Naughty Dog was bought when they were an up and coming studio. Like a lot of these ones that Microsoft is buying are ones that nobody paid attention to, like In Exile, or they're up and coming studios like Ninja Theory. Like, yeah, Ninja Theory's been making games for, like 18 years now, but have they really ever had a mega hit outside of Hellblade? Like the Devil May Cry reboot wasn't it? Heavenly Sword wasn't it?
Enslaved, wasn't it?
Don't even remember Enslaved. I mean, you look at
What Disney Infinity was like, they took on that game, like they did the combat in
yeah,
that game to pay the bills, right?
Compulsion. I mean, Compulsion's had like 2 games ever,
Yeah.
and
Their first game was what, Contrast, right?
yeah,
Which was a PlayStation Plus title on PlayStation 4 originally. So
it was on 360 also.
I know, but I'm saying I played it on PS4 because
Oh,
it was
got
a
you, got you.
PlayStation Plus game at some point.
Yeah, I just think like you look at that and you say, well, everyone kind of has to start somewhere. It's just like they're not doing it at the beginning; they're doing it years and years and years later because the only real studio that they bought at the beginning, they bought Bizarre Creations at one point, I think,
Hmm.
and Bungie. And that
Hmm.
was about it. They didn't have a whole lot of internal studios. Like we talk about how great some of the games on the original Xbox were, and that was back. I mean, God, that era is where like third party studios and publishers were just. You remember the Capcom 5?
Hmm.
Like
Oh
that was a whole
man,
thing. We talk about Sega, and Sega comes up in the court docs a lot
yeah,
um, during this case when we talk about like proposed acquisitions and whatnot. But Xbox was kind of the spiritual successor in a lot of ways to the Dreamcast,
yeah,
and like has kind of continued to carry that torch of being perpetually in third place, like having the most interesting tech, but like not quite being up to snuff, like having these games that are great but become cult classics over time.
yeah,
That don't sell well initially, but they're actually really good. I mean, Sunset Overdrive is kind of a prime example of that.
yeah. I I always I always liked the Xbox because, like, growing up a Sega kid, like,
Hmm.
I wasn't really attached to anything Nintendo related, really. Like, I didn't own a Super Nintendo. My game, like, I had a Game Boy, but I played Tetris and Ninja Turtles, right? I mean, that wasn't like
Yeah,
anything. And then Pokemon later, obviously. But like, I wasn't really attached to Nintendo until Nintendo 64, and even then, I'm like, I got a Dreamcast, and I was like, yeah, Dreamcast. I'm gonna, you know,
God, I miss
check
Dreamcast.
Grind Radio and Crazy Taxi, and maybe Sonic Adventure a little bit. But then like when the Dreamcast went away, like, yeah, I got a PS2, but like I was more of a I leaned more of the GameCube, and then like I started playing Halo with my friends after you know Saturday sports practice, whether it's football or basketball or whatever. We went over to our friend's house and played Halo. And I'm like, I gotta get an Xbox. I gotta get an Xbox. Halo is awesome. And then like I discovered Fable and Knights of the Republic and Jade Empire and all these great games. Brute Force.
God.
uh,
Shout out Brute Force.
yeah. And like one of the most underrated original Xbox games I feel is Stranger's Wrath. Oddworld Stranger's Wrath is an
Yeah.
amazing game. Uh, So I've always had a soft spot for Xbox, but it was really the Xbox 360 that like really made me an Xbox fan, right? Like Gears of War and Oblivion were like, I have to get these. These games look like incredible.
I mean, you were also like, I think the perfect age at that point too,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because you're a couple years older than me. You
Yeah.
were what high school at that time?
Well, when Xbox 360 came out, it was my freshman year of college.
Oh, okay,
And
okay,
we lived across the hall from these twins, and they each had an Xbox 360, and they were playing Gears of War. I'm like, what is this? And they're
yeah.
like, oh, we just got Xboxes, and this is Gears of War. This is like the new game. This is gonna hold us over until Halo comes out. I'm like, I need to play this. I really need to play this. And I mean, Gears was like the Gears of War was the first game I got all the achievements in, you know,
Yeah.
and then I fell in love with a ton of other games,
I
obviously. But
I played Morrowind on the OG Xbox, and I remember
mm,
I played Morrowind before I played Halo. That
mhm,
was my first exposure on Xbox was Morrowind, and I was just like, oh my god, like this is changing my life.
yeah,
I think I was in the 5th grade at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just like, I want an Xbox. I was never able to convince my parents to let me get one. I was still a Nintendo kid. I had a GameCube. I was, God bless me, I was super into it. I played Halo for the first time in late 2003, though,
Mm-hmm.
and playing Halo 1 kind of changed me forever. I met one of my best friends my first day of school at a new school when I was in the 7th grade. Was I bonded with him over Green Day's American Idiot album, which had just come out.
Oh man.
And Halo 2 was about to come out. And I remember I went over to his house because his older brother bought it. His older brother was in college, and we stayed up all night playing it with him. Like seeing the twist and everything else, like seeing, the Arbiter twist and then the
Mm-hmm.
cliffhanger ending. And I was like, I have to get an Xbox. I have to do whatever it takes to get an Xbox. So I started saving my allowance, my $5 allowance. And I was like, it's going to take me a couple years, but I'm going to get this. I spent the entire next summer. I remember seeing, what was it on? Was it on Spike TV?
Yeah.
Elijah Wood showed
Oh
off the
yeah.
360 for the first time, him and
Yeah.
Jay Allard.
No, it was
And
TRL. It was MTV TRL.
oh god, dude, I can't remember at this
I
point. All I
remember.
remember is it was on cable. I watched it, and I'd already gotten the Game Informer issue at this point that was showing Oblivion
Mm-hmm.
in it. And those like 7 screenshots had been holding me over for a couple months at this point. And I found out it was coming out in November. Got my grandma to take me to GameStop right away, placed the order for a launch day console, and then I mowed lawns all summer in the Texas heat to buy it day one, only to find out Oblivion got delayed by 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That and Ghost Recon were what convinced me I needed an Xbox 360 right away instead of just waiting for, because I was prepared to buy a regular Xbox that summer just to play Halo.
Yeah.
And my friends were like, dude, you have the opportunity to get a 360 on launch day. You should just wait.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that was kind of it. I didn't really look back after that. I still bought a Wii, but I was not a PS2 kid. I never owned a PS3. It took me like a year and a half into the PS4's life cycle to buy one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of same with the PS5. It took me, months, but that was because of shortage issues. I just like, I've kind of always been an Xbox guy, and
Yeah.
I look at this now and I'm like, yeah, I don't really like the trend that we're going in of buying publishers.
Yeah.
That's not the Xbox. That's not the Xbox I grew up with like championing these smaller studios. Like BioWare made their name on the Xbox,
Mm-hmm.
right? On the original Xbox and onto the 360. A journey that started, early, even before Knights of the Republic, and culminated in Mass Effect.
Yeah.
Like, until then, they were an exclusive studio. Like, you talk about some of the biggest blunders in Xbox history, and like, yeah, the Xbox One is the number one blunder, that whole reveal, but not purchasing BioWare when you had the chance to has to be like a top 4 or 5 blunder.
Yeah.
Like, so I think that part of that is what drives Phil Spencer now, a guy who's been with Xbox since the beginning, to say, we have an opportunity and we're not going to let the opportunity go by. And yet I feel like with being caught up in this court case, and I'm just happy it's going to be resolved no matter what. This either has to take effect by July 18th or it's over.
Yeah.
And Activision has already said that, hey, if the injunction is granted, that's it. We're done. We're not chasing this anymore. We've been tied up for 18 months. I think it was Matt Booty alluded to, we have had, it was either him or Aaron Greenberg basically said during Showcase Week, we have acquisitions that have either been on hold or outright canceled because of this ongoing thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where, for like those of us watching this, and like once you get past the legalities of everything, which I mean, it's really a he said, she said thing at this point, it's become a farce and a caricature.
Yeah.
But when you look at the stuff that was released that was not redacted and should have been redacted, that's where the juicy stuff is for fans, I think.
Yeah.
Like, you and I were sharing these screenshots as we were seeing them. We were sending these pictures to each other, but like, they had a merger and acquisition sheet, and this is what like launched everyone into a frenzy. It was like 100 companies that they had looked at, and this was from early 2021.
Yeah. So again, but this list, like, this is probably everybody that they were like, here are some possibilities. It's not like they went and offered to buy every single one of these studios,
Right.
right? I want
And
to.
that's the I think that's the important thing to draw the line in the sand with,
Mm-hmm.
is that we saw people just immediately react like, oh, see, look, they're going to buy everything if they're not stopped. Like, no, it's untenable. Like, it literally can't happen. Xbox Game Studios itself is basically at the brink, according to Matt Booty. Like, he cannot oversee everyone by himself anymore.
Yeah.
Let Bethesda manage themselves, and look where that got us. Look where that got us with Redfall.
Yeah.
Activision Blizzard is going to be left to their own devices if this goes through. Like, well, we'll see how that goes. All we know is that Bobby Kotick is out the door. That's all we know.
Yeah. Let's
A $500 million golden parachute.
Yeah. Man.
But like, you look at a lot of these, and like, when you look at the initial list, like the 100+ studios list, none of these names should surprise you. None of these games should surprise anybody on here. It's like, well, yeah, of course they considered these. Like, most of these studios made, really good games, or are, and a lot of these are indie studios too. Like, I think that's the overlooked thing, is like, so many of these are indies. They're not like these gigantic AAA studios like, oh, like, they're going to go buy EA, or they're going to go buy, Epic or something. Like, no. Studio MDHR is on this list.
Yeah.
Stoic Studios is on here. We've heard in the past that, like, oh, studios that we publish games for are targets that we're looking at to possibly acquire in the future. Like, that's kind of how it's being approached.
Yeah.
And that makes sense, because you get to learn how a team works and if you're going to be compatible or not. Like, Stoic Studios remains to be seen. We'll see. Clearly, they like IOI a lot, and IOI is supposedly making an exclusive.
Yeah, but I mean, who hasn't liked IOI in the last decade? Though,
but it's like, then you look at somebody like Avalanche, and you're like, well, that game's kind of gone radio silence in the last 2 years. They may not be on this list anymore.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right.
We laugh about it, but like, a lot of them are smaller studios. There's some bigger ones on there. CD Projekt Red is one of them. For example, Remedy is on there. Like, okay, that's just. And I think, I forget who it was, but somebody who was breaking down and analyzing it basically said, like, this is due diligence. This is what you do in an industry like this. Every single publisher has a list of potential acquisitions.
Yeah.
You are always that. This is the end game of capitalism, is to become bigger and more profitable than your competitors.
Yeah. And those saying that Sony doesn't have a list are kidding themselves, right? I mean, is it this big? Yeah. Probably not. I mean, they're the market leader. Their list is probably way more, curated, but
their list is Square Enix.
Yeah, Square Enix. And Capcom apparently is the new rumor.
No,
but it's interesting to see some of the names on this list, but like, we speculated Sega for years, even on the old show. Like, we were talking about Sega, right? How it would just
the
make
conspiracy
sense.
Blue controller.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's right here. Yep. It's on my desk. It's right here, Josh. It's right here.
Sonic Blue. I remember that got shown right after the Bethesda announcement, and we went into an absolute frenzy. Like, oh my god, are they going to try to buy Sega from Sega Sammy?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, all that's now come back to the surface, to the point where the heads of Sega had to put out a statement through Bloomberg and basically say, we really appreciate the partnership with Microsoft, and we've been partnering with them on a lot of things lately, and we feel they flat out, we feel more respected by them than by Sony or Nintendo.
Yeah.
And people were streaming. They're like, that's because they want to buy you.
Yeah.
Like, and there probably is a degree of truth to that, but you go all the way back to the original Xbox. Like, there's been a partnership with Sega for a long time.
Yeah, Crazy Taxi 3 exclusive.
Crazy Taxi 3, Jet Set Radio Future exclusive.
Dude, I still have my Jet Set Radio Sega
GT.
Yeah, still have that disc. It's in the basement.
It's funny, like, Xbox got everything that wasn't Sonic Adventure 2.
Yeah. No Sonic on Xbox.
Sonic Adventure 2 and Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg went to Nintendo.
But we got Shenmue 2, which was big at the time. I mean, not big, but like, that was I
remember Soul Calibur going multi-platform, and how big of a deal that was. You remember the special characters for each platform?
Spawn, Link. And Heihachi.
Which
for PlayStation.
I thought it was funny then. I think it's funny now that was the exclusive character that PlayStation got.
I know. Spawn ended up being pretty cool.
I mean, I still have Soul Calibur 2 for GameCube around here somewhere.
Yeah, I do too. It's sitting on my shelf over there.
But I mean, they get down to this. They curate this list down, right? And they separated it into developer, self-published developers, and publishers. And again, almost none of these studios should surprise anybody when you look at it, because a lot of them have had partnerships with Microsoft in the past. And I have to say most, because Housemarque is one of the names on this list. And this is from early 2021. You know, and we know obviously the entire strategy changed at some point when they realized in like October, November of that year that Activision was going to be up for sale.
Yeah.
Or that they would sell for the right price, you know. And you look at this, we know that as of April 2021, they had a pitch prepared to show Sega. At some point that either didn't happen, or maybe they wanted to give enough space between, you know, the or the ZeniMax stuff or whatever. But at some point that didn't materialize. I strongly suspect it's because of the Activision Blizzard deal. But you look at this list, and I mean, for the publishers, they have Paradox and they have Sega. And Paradox they partnered with a lot in the past. That's Crusader Kings, a lot of RTS strategy games.
Yeah.
Kind of makes sense. Makes sense from like a PC standpoint.
Yeah.
And they've always said this is about content for Game Pass and for our studios. Like, we're still going to sell the games. Like, you know, like something like that, things aren't going to change with Paradox, you know. That's still going to be available, you know, sparingly on consoles and, you know, really, really big on PC. And then you have Sega. And Sega, I feel, is like, that's the one that alarmed people on here, because I mean, then you're possibly talking about like, well, is Sonic not going to be multi-platform? Like, no, Sonic would have been. And we know from the documents they had for the pitch that Sonic was going to be kept multi-platform. But that raises the question of like, well, you know, a franchise like Jet Set Radio, which never came to PlayStation except for the, you know, digital re-release like 8 years ago, you know, would that be brought to hypothetically PlayStation 5 if Microsoft were to buy them? Probably not. The bigger concern would be for, I think, a lot of, you know, gaming fans, what happens to Atlas and RGG?
Yeah.
Because those games are so new to the Xbox ecosystem. Like, oh, you got them on there and then you decided to buy them.
Yeah.
Like, and I think I would like to think that they're smarter, but that, again, that continues to be, we talked about this on Tower Casuals about why was Microsoft not the one to buy Bungie? You know, Imran Khan and Jeff Grubb and somebody over at Eurogamer, I forget who it was, all kind of broke the news in the same week, because they were all confirming and reconfirming each other to the point where Pete Parsons had to come out and vehemently deny it, that Microsoft had been in talks to purchase Bungie in summer 2020.
Yeah.
And it did materialize. And now we can kind of surmise two different things: that it didn't happen, presumably because Microsoft went and made a move on Bethesda, and they put so many barriers in place on Bethesda's games that they were never going to get Bungie to agree to that.
Yeah.
Bungie wanted to self-publish still and on whatever platforms, and they're like, nah. Also, they didn't meet Bungie's asking price. They weren't prepared to pay what Bungie wanted, which now we know was an insane, absurd amount.
Yeah. Plus, it was like, they didn't want to pay that much because they have such a high burn rate also, right?
Yeah.
And they weren't going to really utilize the kind of things that Sony bought them for, right? Like the multiplayer kind of stuff, right? Because I mean, they could have, but also like Xbox is pretty good at that in general.
Yeah, like when I think of what console I'm going to play multiplayer on, it's probably Xbox. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it's going to, for me, it's going to be Xbox unless it's a exclusive. So,
yeah. But I mean, like you look at the actual studios here, and I mean, like, they have history with People Can Play. They have history with Remedy, with Behavior, with, you know, Bungie, Crytek, IOI, Playdead, Thunderful. The big ones that I think like people got really concerned about were IOI, Larian. Because if they buy Larian, I mean, they literally own every major Western RPG studio except for CD Projekt Red at that point.
Right.
So that is a cause for concern. And Supergiant, the studio behind Hades and Transistor. those were the ones, like, it just seemed to like send people into a frenzy, and it's like, well, I don't know what to tell you guys, because that made their final merger and acquisition list that they were looking at
Mm-hmm.
as of April 2021. And it's like, you can sit here all day and you can play the game of like, well, who's still available on this list, because Bungie's off the table, Scopely is off the table, and Zynga is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Niantic has run themselves into the ground. Playrix is a joke. You kind of only have Thunderful, Supergiant, and IOI left.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, we can sit here and you and I have speculated for a couple of years now that Certain Affinity is probably the next like smaller studio that they will acquire.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense just based on their Halo
The history.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my whole thing
Like,
too,
how does this affect that? I guess.
I mean, I guess it depends on if it goes through or not, right? I mean, I think publishers versus a smaller developer are two different things, and I think
Wildly different things. Yeah.
I think that whoever's regulating this probably knows that. Hopefully, I mean, who
Maybe.
knows? We saw a
I
lot
mean,
of interesting
FTC's
things happen.
lawyers essentially said that, yeah, if you guys had just bought something smaller than Activision Blizzard, we probably would have just turned away. We wouldn't have paid attention.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if they would have done I almost wonder if it would have been better for them to make a deal with someone to have their back catalog on Game Pass, kind of like they've done with Sega a little bit. And like a lot of people are pointing at, obviously Embracer Group, whatever, however you feel about them, has a catalog of games that would be kind of perfect for Game Pass, right? Like Darksiders, Saints Row, Dead Island, stuff like that. Like make a deal with them to have games on Game Pass so you have things in your service, and then buy the smaller studios like Certain Affinity, maybe IOI, maybe you even buy Crystal Dynamics and IDOS Montreal back from, or not back, but from Embracer, because you're working with them so closely on other games anyway, right? Like that to me makes more sense than acquiring ABK in general.
Yeah, and I mean that's been one of my points from the beginning too. Is like, I get that ABK fills so many stated needs that Phil Spencer has had in the past,
Mm-hmm.
but it cannot be worth spending 68 billion on. I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't. Nothing is worth that.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, because I think you can be competitive without that too. Like, you know, you don't have to have these mega franchises on there. And like, I'm now like starting to understand, like, Bobby Kotick, for example, went to Sarabon before Series X came out and was like, hey, if you want an optimized version, you got to increase our revenue share,
Mm-hmm.
in a totally like kind of unprecedented move.
Yeah, which is ridiculous. Like that's so crazy that happened, that came out and that happened, right? Like that's
Yeah. I mean, like, we all know that Bobby Kotick is pretty scummy, and it's like, well, great. So you needed to make even more money off this. Like, this is already a top selling game on Xbox. You need to make even more money, though, which is just bizarre to me. But I've wondered aloud how $68 billion could be better spent
mm-hmm.
by the Xbox division. And like, first off, invest in making a new UI, because you really need it. You need it really badly. You need a new menu screen and things like that. What if you injected even like 500 million into hiring talent at your studios? Like, at each of these studios, by the way. Like, what if you could properly staff 343 and not just have contractors in there?
Yeah. And I mean, in the initiative too, I mean, that studio kind of,
The initiative, yeah, I mean, you could staff up the initiative. Like, what if you injected some of that money into ZeniMax and you told Todd Howard, hey, we're going to let you operate a second full-fledged team out of the Maryland office, but they're going to work on, or, we opened up a specific franchise studio for Fallout.
mm-hmm.
Your team can continue to handle Elder Scrolls and Starfield. Fine, but you're going to take help from some outside studios. We are going to change, like, Bethesda Austin. I've long said Bethesda Austin probably should be renamed like the Vault or Vault Tech or something like that, to take over the Fallout franchise. Like, Todd, you can still oversee it. You can still be the producer,
Mm-hmm.
but let another team, like, take some of the best creators you have from Bethesda, from Obsidian, and from In Exile, and bring them in to make a studio. All three studios that have worked on the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Bring them in and let them do it. Hell, you could even bring in a couple guys. You could bring in somebody from Playground if you have somebody over at Playground that you think does really good storytelling. Like make a super team like they did with the Initiative, or not the Initiative, with the Coalition. You know, but I think like more specific studios that can handle these mega franchises are probably what you needed to do. And then you still have like 65 billion left over, Corey.
I know. And it's like,
go buy your Sega. Go buy your Sega. Go strike a deal to publish the next 2 games from Remedy or something.
The thing too is like, and of course we're playing like armchair financier here, but like also you don't want to wait 10 years between Elder Scrolls games or Fallout games, right? Like that's the other thing too. These are megalithic franchises that you probably want to get out faster than every decade, you know? I mean, by the time Elder Scrolls comes out, it's going to be what, 15 years, 16 years, 17 years in Skyrim?
There will be kids who, by the time this game comes out, there will be kids who probably were born right about the time it came out who will be graduating high school.
Yeah.
That's insane to think about.
Which is like something you probably don't want, right? Like
that's a franchise that with any other studio, we'd be like, oh, that's a dead franchise that they're resurrecting.
Yeah. I mean, the only game that can really do that is Grand Theft Auto, right? But they have the online mode. So it's like, well, that they're still putting content out pretty regularly for that, you know?
Yeah. I think that I think you're exactly right that, you know, even Todd Howard talked about this in his interview with Ryan McCaffrey after the Starfield Direct. He says, you know, when I think about Elder Scrolls 6, he goes, I think about how that's still several years away. And he goes, like, that's probably the last one I'm going to work on.
Yeah.
Because it's taken so long to get to this point. Like he has admitted Starfield took longer to make than he wanted it to.
Yeah.
But that even he's annoyed with how long it takes them to make games.
Yeah.
But I think a part of that is also his nature. I think Todd is a perfectionist. And I think there is a certain degree of expectation that we developed in the industry that when we see, you know, from Todd Howard and his team at Bethesda, that you're like, oh shit.
Right.
Like whether he's directing it or he's producing it, there is an air of expectation. Like there probably would have been excitement if it was just announced that Machine Games was making Indiana Jones. But when you see that Todd is EPing it, you're like, shit.
Yeah.
Like, and then you see the email exchanges that came out during all this, you know, Pete Hines talking about like, you know, everybody who has heard his pitch for it is like, I'm all in on this. Yeah. Like he's been trying to get this made for a decade now. This is kind of his dream game.
Right.
Yeah. Like this is his dream game. And like, you know, Phil Spencer testified to that and was like, yeah, I wanted to make that an exclusive because I want something that has the potential to be as critically acclaimed, that is an outside IP, as Spider-Man is. I don't know if Indiana Jones is the right one for that, but I mean, I'll let Phil do, or Todd do whatever he wants to do.
Yeah. Look, the moment the Indiana Jones game was announced, look, I even played the terrible Wii game that came out. Okay.
I mean, listen, I'm looking for something that's at least as good as Emperor's Tomb here.
Yeah.
That's the standard.
I mean, that bar's not very high.
It's not, but Emperor's Tomb is a really good game.
Yeah, but like I think when people are talking about Indiana Jones, right? I think they're comparing it to Spider-Man and Wolverine and stuff like that. I'm looking at it as like this could be Xbox's Uncharted at this point.
Well, and it's funny because that was definitely PlayStation's Indiana Jones.
Right.
Was what Uncharted was always billed at. And that's why I laugh so hard now when I see people going, you know, oh my God, this is Xbox's Uncharted. And it's like, oh, guys, we had this discourse like 15 years ago. Some of you were too young for it.
Yeah.
Some of y'all were wee tykes back then, but we were having this argument when I was 15 on message boards. Right. So,
yeah.
Back in the days of MySpace.
Yeah. Man, MySpace, man. Top 8.
MySpace.
I don't know if I even had 8 friends.
I mean, like, I look at how you could spend that money, though, and it's just like, yeah, I do appreciate, you know, Phil basically saying, like, hey, we don't want to do deals like the Square Enix deals, right? We don't want, and I think he's really gun shy on doing that after Rise of the Tomb Raider backfired so badly on them. Um,
Yeah.
trying to take an installment and a classic franchise exclusive, and what also undercut them was that them announcing that it was going to come to PlayStation the following year,
Mm-hmm.
and not just being like, well, maybe it'll come one day, or oh yeah, it's just a timed exclusive, but we're not going to tell you how long. Like, I feel like they've learned from that, but also it's kind of like, well, if we're going to spend that much money, because it's estimated they spent $100 million to make that exclusive
Yeah.
for 1 year.
Yeah.
And that's insane. At that point, just like, that's almost the price of what they paid to buy Ninja Theory.
Right.
So,
Isn't that nuts? Oh man.
like, they probably paid less than that to buy an Exile or Obsidian or something. Like, who knows? But I look at it and it's like, part of the Activision deal is also like, we're buying them because that's so many more people. Like, Xbox is going to double in size if this goes through.
Yeah.
And like, we've talked for a while how like they really need to establish a support studio that is not out there to make games but comes in to help polish and finish first party games like Sony has.
Yeah.
Sony has that team that they were originally going to do the Last of Us remake, and then they were just put back to doing what they normally do. But they've come in to do finishing work on The Last of Us 2, on Ghost of Tsushima, on God of War Ragnarok, on Horizon Forbidden West, and like, look at all those games, bangers, game of the year contenders.
Right.
You need studios that can come in. You need support studios to help you with that. And like, if you were to wire Certain Affinity, like, that's kind of the beginning of that. Like, they make all your multiplayer maps as it is for things like Gears and Halo. They help so much with those franchises. And they still want to make their own game. Like, they're supposed to be making a Monster Hunter style game that Microsoft is going to publish.
Mm-hmm.
But like, you need support, and you need to shore up your own studios before you go. There go the first fireworks.
Mm-hmm.
You need to shore up your own house before you go dropping money on publishers, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. So where do we go from here, Josh? What's the plan here? What are we doing from here?
Like, business wise?
No, like from like in terms of the court case, like what's on the doc, like what do we need to talk about really that happened during the court case?
I mean, it's just like a lot of this centered on, I wouldn't even say like the legality, but I would say like the morality of exclusives is what a lot of this focused on, and on subscriptions. We've talked about, like the juicy shit that came out, the potential acquisitions list, and the revelation that IOI is in fact making a game for Xbox, or was, at least as of 2021, confirming one of Jez Corden's many scoops.
Mm-hmm.
But that we've seen them continue, like, they're not joking when they say that like Game Pass is their business model. Yep. They are investing money in Game Pass deals. We've seen that with, Atlas and RGG, bringing Persona and Yakuza to Xbox through Game Pass is a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sets you up like, oh, the series are on there, but your next full installments or the next games from these studios are not going to be. So like a Dragon Gaiden and like a Dragon 8 coming out next year are not going to be on Game Pass,
mm-hmm.
nor is Metaphor next year, or presumably when Persona 6 comes a couple years down the road. So that makes sense. Like, okay, so you're doing that to establish a foothold for these studios that traditionally have never published on Xbox.
Right.
And in turn, like, at least with like the Yakuza and Like a Dragon series, the heads of that studio have said like, yeah, that the series never really took off in the West, and then we put it on Game Pass, and like that was it. And like a similar deal was struck for PS Plus after that. But I think that when you look at like what else this court case brought in, I mean, you had Nvidia. I think Nvidia had really good testimony where they were basically like, yeah, we were opposed to it. And then, Microsoft started, kind of presenting their vision. And part of it's like, oh, we secured a deal to get, Bethesda and Microsoft games on GeForce Now. So of course we like it. Like, of course we want this to go through. But I think also like it's because Nvidia got declined on a merger a couple years ago.
Yeah.
The FTC and the CMA stopped them on that one. So, which, to be fair, that would have caused a complete chip monopoly.
Right.
That would have absolutely caused one. So I don't think this one is necessarily that. The most bizarre aspect of this entire thing, and I think one that's been like drastically underreported, is the determination by court systems to say that Nintendo is not a competitor to
Oh, I
Microsoft and
know.
Sony.
Dude, there's
That
so
is
much
the most
Nintendo talk.
laughable thing to me.
It was ridiculous, man. Like,
Oh, it's so bad.
yeah, I'm like, Nintendo has sold more than both of your consoles combined at this point. Granted, it had a couple year head start, but like, come on, it's clearly a competitor. It's clearly like, if nothing else,
Yeah.
a supplemental console to these consoles, and therefore everybody's buying one, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, you talk about like exclusives, like there's no console that moves exclusives like the Switch does.
I know.
You know, we talk about, and like, Sony, you and I have talked about this, didn't really crack this code until last generation. Uncharted 4 was kind of seen as an aberration until God of War.
Well,
And then
I would actually
they
say
started.
the end of the PS3, right? With Uncharted 2 and 3, The Last of Us.
I mean, even those, though, those even struggled to hit more than like a 10% attachment rate.
Yeah. That's
Like,
Oh, you're talking about like sales wise.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
talking sales. I think in terms of quality, they got there. They were definitely there. But like even that, we were like, oh, is this just like a Naughty Dog thing?
Yeah.
And it really took us partway through the PS4 generation to go, oh, it's everyone. Like
Mm-hmm.
they allowed their, and I think like we have to wonder how much of that was Sean Layden and Shuhei Yoshida.
Mm-hmm.
Going in and telling the studios, you can make what you want. Like you pitched us, you can make what you want. And we've seen Microsoft like clearly trying to take that stance now with their teams, right? Like cook, make what you want. Like I would never have imagined Josh Sawyer leading a team of 8 people to make an RPG, but then it ends up being, one of the best games of the year.
Right.
He's the director of Fallout New Vegas. He's the director of Pillars of Eternity. I expect him to be helming something like Avowed,
Right.
not this.
Not Pentiment.
Which,
Yeah.
great. But how do I want to phrase this? To say that Nintendo is not a competitor is like, it's so ludicrous that it's like saying that, I don't know.
It's
That
ridiculous. It's so
yeah,
ridiculous.
I can't even think. I can't even think of like anything comparable. But it's like, so you're saying that because they're like a little underpowered, that they're not a competitor. So it's like saying that DreamWorks is not a competitor to Pixar
Yeah.
because their animation like doesn't look as good.
Yeah.
And they're not backed by Disney. Like, okay, so how is it that they outsell the Xbox by like 2-1 and they're not a competitor?
I mean, I think it's more than that at this point.
It's about there. Well, if you're comparing just Series X and S, then yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess
They're outselling like 5-1 if you look at that.
Yeah. I mean, if you I guess if you like count the Xbox One and the Xbox Series, then yeah, I guess 2-1.
Yeah, somebody added up if you did consoles across the board, like just trying to dispel this argument. It's like if you combine PS4 and PS5 sales, they're roughly at about 155 million.
Yeah.
Switch and Wii U sales combined about 140-ish. Series X, S, and One, 80 million.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, Nintendo is more of a competitor to Sony than Microsoft is.
Yeah.
That's why, like, when people were talking about, oh, this is going to monopolize things, like, no, this is maybe going to pull Microsoft's market share in line with Nintendo, who's supposedly number 2.
Yeah.
Like, this might make number 2 competitive.
Yeah.
Like, Sony still leads by, like, such a large margin.
Yeah.
So, I just think, like, to say that Nintendo's not a competitor and to say that this is going to cause a monopoly, like, both of those arguments are just, like, kind of asinine. And it's like, those are arguments I think that fanboys make.
Yeah.
To try and make themselves feel better.
Yeah.
It's like, it's as ludicrous as saying that the Amazon Luna is a competitor at this point.
Whoo, yikes.
Or saying that Stadia ever stood a chance.
Yeah. I always
the Phil Harrison curse, man, it's real.
I know, man. Oof. It's
oof.
rough.
Big oof. Big oof.
Yep. Yeah, man. That's ooh. Let me tell you.
Yeah, this is just it's silly. Like everything about this is so silly.
Yeah,
And
it's
I don't know where you really go from there. Um I think that there's been some other nuggets, that Phil apparently didn't decide to take ZeniMax stuff exclusive until 2021. Um
yeah. I mean, that Pete
that
Hines email was pretty interesting to read, although I think it might be taken out of context. I know he's pretty like boisterous and really, says what's on his
Yeah.
mind, but like,
So the Pete Hines email came a few months after this. Like
yeah,
the 2021 stuff happens, and that was about the time that was about 2-3 months before the Activision purchase was announced.
hmm
That like Phil didn't decide to fully take them exclusive until then. Um, and I think it still remains to be seen because like Phil was like, oh, we don't know about Elder Scrolls 6, but it's like our stance back then was kind of the same that it is now. You don't spend $8 billion to not take Elder Scrolls exclusive, and like also $8 billion looks like a steal at this point.
yeah,
I'm personally of the opinion that that and Fallout will eventually come to PlayStation, but like a year and a half later or something, like 18 months later, because Pete kind of talked about this in court, right? Where he says, I guarantee you that if we were putting this out on PS5, Starfield is not launching in 8 weeks.
right,
Like this game would not be coming out in September.
yeah,
Like developing for one console is easier than developing for two.
yeah. Of course it is. I mean, I feel
Um,
like I feel like even as a non-developer, that people who at least even pay attention remotely would know that that's true. You know,
mhm.
I mean, look how polished. Like going back to the Nintendo argument for a minute, like look how polished Nintendo games are compared to every other game on that console that
Right.
is multi-platform. Or like look at how polished Sony's exclusives are compared to something like, I mean, Cyberpunk. Even at launch, right? Like that was it. It's just the one console thing clearly has its advantages.
Mhm. It definitely does. And then you have just like some completely like I'm kind of like running through like a Cliff Notes thing right now. You have some absolutely batshit statements like Satya Nadella saying that console exclusive, if it was up to him, he'd get rid of console exclusives.
Yeah, I
Like,
saw that.
buddy, let me tell you something. Nobody's buying your hardware then if that
Yeah, I
happens.
know.
Consoles would cease to exist. We'd all be on PC. Welcome to monopolization. Sony accidentally had some stuff unredacted. Whoever was doing the redactions did them with a Sharpie,
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
revealing that both Last of Us Part 2 and Horizon Forbidden West cost over $200 million to produce. Those games have also generated like $300 million in profit apiece.
Yeah.
Should not be shocking to anybody to see the statistics. I mean, those games are just wild sellers, and they're not even like selling as good as God of War Ragnarok did.
Yeah.
So, Microsoft at one point considered purchasing Square Enix back in 2019,
hmm
which we talk about the things that I'm thankful did not happen. I'm very thankful that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
like,
just weird, first of all.
it's not even that it's weird. It's just that I feel like I've made the case enough today that I like I don't mind. Well, I don't like, but I don't mind acquisitions if it's a company you have a long history with.
Yeah.
They do not have that history with Square. Now, I will say the one upside if Microsoft were to have purchased Square is that I think they would have kept Final Fantasy on every platform. Dragon Quest would have gone on every platform,
hmm
but they would have kept the Nintendo deals in place for things like Bravely Default and just been like, oh, well, these are going to come to Xbox also now, by the way. Triangle Strategy coming to Xbox.
Yeah.
You know, if Sony goes through and buys Square, which I mean, I'm either way that this case goes, I get some insanely more likely if this gets approved. If this gets approved, I would not be shocked to see Sony announcing a Square Enix purchase within like the next month or two.
Yeah.
If this doesn't go through, then I think they hold off a little unless Microsoft makes a move on Sega and then they go, well, screw it, we're going to get the other one.
Yeah. My thing is that I feel like Square Enix has been offloading a lot of,
Mm-hmm.
extra
They offloaded the studios that Sony did not want, and I almost guarantee you, if the Activision thing wasn't a thing, Microsoft would have been the one who scooped up Crystal Dynamics.
Yeah.
I'll all but guarantee that for you.
And I wonder if they still will, because Embracer Group is like hemorrhaging money, apparently.
I can't imagine that they give up the best studio that they own. That's my only thing. Like, I think Crystal Dynamics is probably safe in all this because they are co-producing the next Tomb Raider with Amazon money.
Yeah, and I mean, they're also working on Perfect Dark with Microsoft money.
Right. So, like, if it happens, it won't happen for a while.
Yeah.
I feel like that Crystal Dynamics is pretty safe in Eidos because those are two really recent purchases. I think if anything, like the big studios, them, Gearbox, 4J, or not 4J, whoever it is that makes the Metro series.
A something. A. I gotta look it
up. Those studios are probably safe. But like we know that Embracer had a deal that was worth a couple $1 billion that has fallen through. It's been widely speculated that was a Microsoft deal. And that Microsoft pulled out at some point. Whether that was a Game Pass deal, distribution deal, or whatever, they pulled at some point. I don't know who else could have made a $2 billion deal and then pull out.
Yeah.
I think it was Microsoft when they saw, because this happened right around the time that the CMA said they were going to block it. And all of a sudden we get this news about Embracer.
Yeah.
And part of me is wondering if that was, maybe Microsoft, and this is pure speculation on my part. I have no reasonable, I have no sources or anything on this, but like part of me wonders if that was maybe like, oh, well, we probably should cancel this deal because we're about to have to pay $4 billion to Activision if this gets blocked by the FTC.
Yeah.
Which they will have to pay $4 billion if this falls through.
I know.
And I can't imagine that Satya Nadella is too happy about that.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think that the message will be you need to make guaranteed bets going forward, and that's why I expect, like, if this falls through, smaller studios are to play again. Like something like, as much as I like Supergiant, okay, I want to be really clear, I like Supergiant games being on every platform. That is the kind of studio that I feel fits the mold of what they want to do.
Yeah.
Someone like Stoic
Thunderful
fits the mold of what they want to do. Do what?
Thunderful, too.
Yeah, Thunderful is a little trickier because they have a publishing arm.
Yeah, it's true.
Which has only grown since 2021. But they've also made pretty good internal games. I mean, they made Lost in Random, for example. I think any of those would be fine. Like, maybe we get to a point where like, ID at Xbox operates as a publisher.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. We all remember Summer of Arcade. We all remember, Xbox Live Arcade games. And a lot of people spent last generation bemoaning that was gone. And I think Game Pass striking all these indie deals has really made us like go, oh, that's right. They do have these great indie partnerships. Like we had a lapse of about 18 months there, if that, where Microsoft seemed to not care about indies. And it's like the second Don Matrick was out of there, the first thing Phil did was ID at Xbox as a thing.
Yeah, which was smart. That was smart.
And Chris Charla, I mean, God, I don't know. His name is not brought up a lot. He's not someone who's trotted out on stage very often these days. I don't know if there is anybody in terms of partnerships that is more important at Xbox, with the exception of Sarah Bond, than Chris Charla. He is always out there, trying to strike deals, whether it's Game Pass deals or like indie deals or whatever. You're like, hey, we'll give you the dev kits. We want you on here. He's got programs going for, marginalized developers and this and that. Like we want to give you guys visibility and things like that. I mean, look at the long-term deals they've struck with publishers like Raw Fury and Devolver and Annapurna to bring their games to Game Pass, Like it's this whole thing. And that's how you supplement a service like that. Like I think that's one of the understated values of something like Game Pass is, yeah, we're waiting on the AAA games, but like, look at all the indies that come here all the time. When people say there's nothing to play on Game Pass, I'm just like, do you play anything other than the latest AAA releases?
Right. Have you even scrolled down like past?
I wait for that blog post twice a month that tells me what games are coming.
Yeah.
And yeah, pickings have been slim lately. Planet of Lena has been like the one big thing that's dropped, I feel. And if you don't pay attention to indies, you probably don't care. But you look at what they've got coming in this fall, like They have a deal for Liza P.
Yeah,
That game's going to be huge.
dude, that game's gonna be massive.
I think that game's going to be absolutely massive.
I mean, even if you keep with indies like Sea of Stars, that originally wasn't even going to come to Xbox, is now day one exclusive or day one Game
Game
Pass.
Pass. I mean, and that's probably how they got it to Xbox. Is they were like, "Hey, we will pay you to put it on Game Pass."
Yeah.
But you look at that, like Annapurna's got a lot of games coming. Thirsty Suitors is coming this fall. I'm very excited for that game. Very excited.
What a weird game, man. I mean,
I don't. You know what? Annapurna publishes a game, and I just play it. Okay.
I mean, that's fair.
I'm very easy. I'm very easy to please here.
You and Stephanie both are like hardcore Annapurna.
Oh, dude, the little off topic, but they revealed that Blade Runner game as their first internal game, and the scream that left my mouth, Corey.
Yeah. So, what is that game anyway?
Don't know.
Yeah,
they didn't really show anything of it.
I just saw your tweet, and I was like, oh, Josh is excited.
Annapurna is making a Blade Runner game. I'm very excited. It's the first Blade Runner game in like 25 years.
Yeah, something like that.
I am extremely excited for this. I feel like anybody who knows me really, really well knows that I love like that futuristic, like grounded in reality sci-fi.
Yeah.
It's why Cyberpunk was such a big deal for me. But I really love the Blade Runner movies.
Yeah.
Nothing has had like as much impact on like my way of like thinking about sci-fi outside of Star Wars than Blade Runner has. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited. It's sandwiched almost perfectly between the two movies.
Yeah.
In terms of when it's going to take place in 2033, I believe, right around the time that the anime took place. So if that incorporates any elements of Lotus, I'll be really happy. Just curious to see what the game ultimately looks like and what it plays like. I think that there is a chance for this to be really cool. And it's the first game Annapurna has actually made. Annapurna was a film studio first and foremost. Mm. So, and when they got into games, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, but they've been probably the best indie publisher of the last 5-6 years.
Yeah, they've been pretty consistent.
While we're talking about Game Pass, one of the other things here is Jim Ryan said that he does not, that many publishers believe that Game Pass is value destructive.
I believe the term was unanimously don't like Game Pass.
Yes. the exact quote he gave, I talked to all the publishers and they unanimously do not like Game Pass because it is value destructive. Which is wild. When Xbox was reached for comment by IGN, Xbox pointed to an Xbox Wire article that stated that every Game Pass title announced at this year's Game Showcase is coming from a creator that's previously launched a game on the subscription service.
Yeah. I think...
And you had a lot of publishers come out. Behavior was one of the ones that came out. They literally announced a Game Pass distribution deal the next day. Mm-hmm. I forget what publisher he works for, but I'll think of it. Anyways, Corey, go ahead with your thought. I'm forgetting.
So my thought was like, there are definitely publishers out there that don't need Game Pass to succeed, right? I mean, all of the AAA ones, like Take-Two. I know Strauss Zelnick came out and said that he doesn't really care for Game Pass or subscription services. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Activision Blizzard doesn't, their games will sell by the tens of millions, right, every year. Don't need Game Pass. I mean, Bobby Kotick even came out and kind of said that he doesn't really like Game Pass at the hearing. Yeah. But, like, there are tiers to this, right? Like, Ubisoft is a studio that I think their back catalog heavily benefited from Game Pass before they started Ubisoft Plus, and there's still Ubisoft games coming to Game Pass, right? I think the EA Play deal, obviously EA sees some sort of benefit for Game Pass Ultimate, right? To put that service within Game Pass, I think a lot of indie developers depend on it just to get to their next game, or like for discoverability, for people playing their game, right? Like Ravenlock was a game I played earlier this year that I would have never even known about or played, except for Sarah Bond tweeted about it, and she said it was on Game Pass, and I played it, and I got all the achievements in it, and it was a great 5-hour game. And I was like,
and yes. It was part of the showcase last year.
Yeah, and I was like, this is awesome. This game was awesome.
The publisher I was trying to think of was Nowhere Robots.
Oh yeah, Yeah.
And I was trying, Micro's over there.
Mm-hmm.
He tweeted about it. He was like, it's been pretty great for us because he's talked about it in the past, and like discoverability of their games just like skyrocketed. Specifically, I think it was their game, Yes, Your Grace,
Yeah.
was the one that was big. But
Didn't they
like
do
just
that biking game Descenders
yeah,
or
they
something?
published Descenders. They did a lot, but this one this was funny because he was like, yeah, it came out, on Steam right as COVID hit, and it made 600 grand in its release weekend and was a success. That was a success for the game. And he was like, the amount of retention that we saw when we launched on Game Pass of people who played it and then would later buy it was ridiculous. We did not expect that.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, like some of the games that they've published, for example, and not all of these have come to the service, but uh, I say that, but I'm actually pretty sure they all have. Descenders, Nowhere Profit, Yes, Your Grace, um, Let's Build a Zoo. I think Heist Simulator was one. Soccer Story, and then they've got one coming out later this year, Slayer's X.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Which is,
or it just
it's
came,
already
it's,
on
it
Game Pass.
just came out. Yep, it was a PC thing. I wasn't really paying attention.
It's a follow up to, and it's in the same universe as Hypnospace Outlaw.
Okay, got you. Yeah,
But it's
so
a different type of game.
they put everything on Game Pass at this point. Like, and he came out and said, he was like, yeah, he's like, I think this was right around, or he's like, we just launched Slayer's X and we've got like 2 or 3 more games in the pipeline that we're publishing that we haven't even announced yet that are going to come to it. So that's pretty crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, like, there's definitely an argument to be made that it benefits indie publishers way more than it does AAA's. But I mean, he's been like, it's been great for our creators. Like, we took a whim on it. We were like, dang, the discoverability of our games just skyrocketed.
Well, the other type of games too, like Outriders, when it came out, right? Game Pass game.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I mean, I know some people had their fun with it and like some people didn't liked it more than others, but like that game found a following because Game Pass and then word of mouth to PlayStation players, and I really liked Outriders, and I don't know
I
if I
just
would
wish
have.
that game. I mean, I have my own gripes with Outriders, but it's more of Square Enix's management of People Can Fly
Oh yeah.
than anything.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think that whole argument is just, that was pretty clearly debunked to me.
yeah, I really
Because I
like
mean, why would
Outriders.
Sega be making a long term deal? Like, Sega just they put 2 of the best RPGs of the last 15 years onto that service right away, and that's not counting the Yakuza games, right?
Right.
They put Persona 4 and Persona 5 in their complete editions. The day they came to Xbox, they also went to Game Pass.
Yeah.
Persona 5 was in the most played games for like 4 months. I loved Persona 5 so much. Like, I've spoken at length on almost every podcast for the last 8-9 months about how much I loved this game. It is one of the only times I can remember that I played a game on Game Pass because I tried it on PlayStation. I didn't like it years ago. Gave it another shot with Royale with all the quality of life changes. I beat the game, and that next weekend I went out and I bought the launch special edition of it on Xbox so that I could have the Steelbook on my shelf, knowing that I was never going to crack that disc open. Because I liked it that much, and I was going to be one of those people who was like, no, we want these games on Xbox. Like, there is an audience for these on Xbox.
Yeah. And to be fair, like even the games on Xbox that I really, really love, or on Game Pass that I really love, I will end up buying because I want to support it that much more, right? So
I did that for a long time, and then I realized I was playing and loving way too many games. I mean, Tunic was one of my favorite games of 2021, and it was a Game Pass game.
Mm-hmm.
2021 is that when that came out?
Yeah. Was it 21 or was it 22? Because Death's Door came out before.
It was last year.
Was it?
It was last year.
Because Death's Door was
22.
2021.
Yeah,
which was a game that I fell in love with because of Game Pass, also.
Yep. But yeah, Tunic was my indie game last year. I couldn't believe that Stray got all the credit over it. But I look at something like that and I go, man, I don't mind the new PS Plus. I don't mind extra and whatnot. But this service could be so much more if they had even a fraction of the indie deals that Microsoft has. that service could be just insanely better.
Yeah.
The last one for me that was really funny out of Jim Ryan's testimony was him admitting in an email that Starfield being exclusive on Xbox is not anti-competitive. They're like, I don't like it, but it's not an anti-competitive move. Like, they basically did what we would have done, essentially. Like, they did exactly what we would have done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I found that to be really funny. Because that's been a big thing. Like, you know, his exact quote was, I don't like it, but I fundamentally have no quarrel with it. That, you know, that's just like, oh yeah, that's pretty funny, actually. I don't like it. It's not anti-competitive. I mean, hey, if you guys want Redfall, you can have Redfall. Let me tell you, you are more than welcome to it.
I'm sure they would love to sell it on PlayStation now just to recoup some costs at some point.
Oh my god, can you imagine, even just for the memes?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think we're kind of like running out of. We covered a lot of day 1 and 2 already when we were talking earlier at the beginning, but some of the other classic things that were said. Phil Spencer literally trying to swear under oath.
Mm-hmm.
Judge Corley reminded Spencer he was under oath. He said, "I will raise my hand. I will do whatever it takes. We have no plan. I'm making a commitment standing here that we will not pull Call of Duty. It is in my testimony from PlayStation."
Mm-hmm.
Phil confirmed that they had heard the same things that Imran Khan reported on this in 2020, and everyone like kind of laughed at him because it was about the same time as the Bungie news.
Yeah.
He said that he had heard as recently as a couple weeks before the PlayStation PS5 reveal that Sony was trying to acquire exclusivity of Starfield, and that as soon as Microsoft saw the announcement that Ghostwire and Deathloop were going to be timed exclusives, that's when they went to Bethesda and were like, yeah, we're ready to purchase you. I found that one to be pretty funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what was the other one I was going to bring up? How Jim Ryan's argument, you were talking about how Phil said he was basically ready to swear at the oath right there, right? Like in one of the emails, Jim Ryan was like, well, it says Overwatch, but it doesn't say Overwatch 2.
Oh my god, dude, I got so mad at that. I was like, you fucking nerd. They're
like,
basically the same game.
They are. You can't even get Overwatch. They replaced the client with Overwatch 2. It's literally Overwatch 2 was just an update to the Overwatch 1 client.
The other thing that was pretty funny that came out was they were getting grilled on why is there not a PS5 version of Minecraft, and Phil's like, yeah, they didn't want to give us dev kits. They've been pretty open about like, we don't like sharing tech with competitors and this and that, and like that seems to be part of the reason why they don't want this purchase to go through, is they don't want to have to share PS6 dev kits down the road.
Yeah.
And I believe that's why Minecraft for consoles was always managed by 4J, was so that Microsoft did not have access to PlayStation technology.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on there. I thought Phil missed a really golden opportunity to remind them that it's not even optimized on Xbox consoles.
Yeah, and I mean, do you think that's why it's not? Like, just to keep parity so PlayStation doesn't get angry?
Probably.
Because, like, they had that ray tracing thing ready to go for Xbox, and then they never released it.
Yeah, I would suspect that that's part of it, is that because they promised to keep parity. Which I think that's a noble idea, but if somebody's not willing to play ball with you, then that's on them. They can explain that to their customers, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, especially when
it's like, Microsoft can come out and explain to fans why they're not getting Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Remake on Xbox, because you didn't write the check.
Yeah.
Sorry. Because y'all don't buy these fucking games.
Right.
Like, just sorry, like, there may be fans of these games on Xbox, and like that's why I'm so determined that we're going to keep Persona on this box. Like, but everybody who wants to play those games has grown accustomed to needing a PlayStation, or like in some cases a Nintendo Switch, for things like Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy and Bravely Default and ones like that. Like, but if you want a mainline Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest game, you're probably, and I suspect in the future it's going to be for Kingdom Hearts also, you've always been a PlayStation person.
Yeah.
You got conditioned to this back in the PS1 era, and it's never changed. We had a few aberrations where The Final Fantasy 13 trilogy released day and date on Xbox, and that was about it.
Mm-hmm. Kingdom Hearts 3 also released on Xbox One the same day as PlayStation.
Yeah, but it was like who was I want to know who was buying that on Xbox other than people like me who didn't own a PlayStation at the time, because we didn't even have 1 and 2 on the console yet. Those came like a year and a half later.
I know.
To Game Pass.
Yeah. And didn't get a physical edition, which people were pretty mad about.
Yeah, I've gotten less mad about that, but yeah.
I was mad at the time because I really like Kingdom Hearts.
I like physical copies, but I think really like the last kind of like interesting tidbits here were Jim Ryan saying that he's pretty sure we'll continue to see Call of Duty on PlayStation for many years to come.
Mm-hmm.
He said that in an email like the week after the acquisition was announced.
Mm-hmm.
Right about the time Phil Spencer made the very public, proclamation that they're going to continue putting it on there. And then, something happened in August 2022 to shake his faith in that.
Yeah.
Microsoft expects the next generation of consoles to be in 2028.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
That's pretty interesting to me as well. And then,
do you think there's going to be a mid-gen refresh then, or I don't think there is either, because I remember there was.
I think you'll see slim versions of these consoles maybe as early as next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely going to be a smaller version of the PS5. I think at some point, because that thing is
there has to be. There has to be that thing. I like it. I like the design of it, but it's so huge. It's huge. I don't like it. I'm not a fan. Make it smaller.
Yeah, it's so big, man. This reminds me of.
And I'm sorry, like the Series X needs to get smaller too.
I would totally buy an all digital Series X if it came in the form factor of the Series S, or like maybe slightly bigger. I love the Series S.
I'd consider it,
but that's just me. It's hooked up on my desk right here.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. The last kind of funny thing I think was Matt Booty saying that the decision has not been made on if Outer Worlds 2 is going to come to PlayStation or not. Spoiler alert, there's like a 99% chance it's not going to.
Yeah.
I'd actually be a little surprised if it did at this point.
Yeah.
This whole case has just been really fascinating, I think, like regardless of like what side you're on of this.
Yeah.
Because it exposes so much of the industry that we don't normally get to see.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all the information that has come out is pretty fascinating. Like,
even if a lot of it was supposed to be redacted.
Yeah, I mean the PlayStation stuff was super interesting. The Xbox, like the Indiana Jones thing, was really interesting to hear.
Yeah,
I think overall, like, I think the big concern, like if this deal doesn't go through, is someone still going to try to buy ABK, and is that going to be someone like either some foreign entity that maybe doesn't need to be in there, right? Like, because like I know like the Saudi government is very involved in trying to, be in games and stuff, and like they even have some internal studios within the government now making games supposedly, and like they had some ex-director from EA even go over there to head up studios. Like, are we concerned about that? Or I mean, that seems kind of like Tencent. Would Tencent come in and try to buy ABK? Like, is that something that people should be concerned about? I don't know. I mean, we kind of touched on that when the deal was first announced, but like, it just seems like this kind of thing is growing in concern.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm fascinated to see what the decision is this week, because I believe the judge wanted final arguments in by the 8th at the latest.
Yeah.
The FTC was trying to hold it until like the last possible second, and the judge is like, "Yeah, we're not going to do that. Yeah. We're going to let the companies figure out what they want to do." Because I mean, if she doesn't grant the injunction, then it seems like Microsoft is just going to force this thing through.
Yeah.
They'll just ignore this because the CMA conference is supposed to be at the end of July.
Yeah.
And like they'll let the CMA conference work out to see like what's going to happen, but they're going to move the close no matter what.
Yeah.
And depending on what happens with the CMA, like it seems like the government's not too thrilled with them over that anyways.
Yeah.
They may very well get overruled there for like overstepping.
Yeah.
There's been a couple different possibilities floated around for that. I'll probably save that for when we next meet.
Yeah.
Because that may be a moot point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, which way are you leaning? Are you leaning a specific way? I mean, do you are you like is
And
it like a toss up for you? Like
I really think it's pretty close to a toss up. If I had to choose, I would say it probably goes 60-40. 60 that I think it goes through, 40 that I think it gets denied.
yeah.
Because I think Microsoft sufficiently proved that market share is not going to change in terms of the console space.
Yeah.
And that Call of Duty is not going to go exclusive or anything like that. But the judge did start raising cloud concerns in final closing arguments.
Mhm.
That's finally when we got around to the cloud version of this, and still it circled back to Call of Duty ultimately.
Yeah.
I do think that is, and I do think that that's a real point of concern, but it won't be for several years. And I understand that, like, you have to kind of try and future guess now if you're going to allow this thing to go through. But also, like, this industry changes so much. Who's to say that Call of Duty is still going to be mega popular 5 to 10 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, you have a whole generation of kids that are growing up that I mean, I think a lot of people that are playing Call of Duty are like more in the realm of our age bracket because kids are playing Fortnite, they're playing Minecraft, they're playing, Apex, they're playing all these free to play things that, maybe Call of Duty is like this part of the deal is like, yeah, it'll still be popular, but will it be like, is it going to go the way of the way that Halo did when Call of Duty became popular, right? Like,
Right.
that's my thought specifically because like my nephew, like he loves Fortnite. He has zero interest in Call of Duty. Like we talked about it a little bit. Like, and granted, he's 10 and maybe he just isn't the right age to even pay attention to that stuff. But he has like zero interest in Call of Duty. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, things are always shifting in terms of
Mm-hmm.
popularity, and I think like it's a testament to Call of Duty that it's survived this long.
Yeah.
But like even longtime players seem to just be getting more and more annoyed with it.
Yeah.
It's still releasing broken and buggy. But like I say this, and then Modern Warfare 2 had like the best launch sales of a Call of Duty game ever. So
yeah, but that seemed like in terms of recent Call of Duty releases, doesn't that seem to be more the exception and not the rule at this point? Like Modern Warfare,
I
Modern
think
Warfare 2 seem to be pretty.
I want to say it's probably the hype around Infinity Ward being back to like form.
Yeah.
I mean, like I think you look at like Call of Duty over the last decade, and yeah, the game sold decently, but like let's look at it. It went Ghosts, Advanced Warfare, Infinite Warfare, and all three of those, all three of those are bad, in my opinion. All three are bad.
Mm-hmm.
You have Black Ops 3 thrown in there somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
which I never played. You had Black Ops 4 eventually, which was multiplayer only.
Yeah.
And obviously gets abandoned after a year, so that left a sour taste in people's mouth. They attempted to go back to World War II at one point.
Yeah, it was literally called World War II.
Yeah. And then you had the Modern Warfare reboot. You had Black Ops Cold War, which
Vanguard
Black Ops Cold War did not seem to go over well. And then you had Vanguard and Modern Warfare 2. To the point where like this year's title was supposed to be like an expansion and they just made it into a full game instead. So Modern Warfare 3 is coming literally a year later.
Yeah.
And it's clear like they want to make money off the Modern Warfare name because like we associate Modern Warfare with like the best Call of Duties.
Also, I wonder if that's like Warzone is so big, and I wonder if it's just easier to keep. Obviously, Modern Warfare 2 was the launch of Warzone 2, but like they were reporting so many problems with like so many eras of games that use different engines and trying to work that into Warzone, right? Like.
Yeah,
I wonder if that has anything to do with it also because
I think that's got to be part of it. And like that, I think that's one of the more curious things about like if this deal goes through, like how does the Call of Duty franchise change? Because I think it's no secret that Phil is going to walk in there and say we are shifting to like an every 2 or 3 year policy on Call of Duties.
Yeah, and I also wonder if that would keep partners like because they have the marketing for Battlefield from EA too, right? And like I wonder if they moved Call of Duty to every other year. I'm sure EA would be thrilled to release a Battlefield game or a Battlefront game in the off years of Call of Duty, right? Like I'm sure they would be thrilled to not have to compete with that.
But like it also I think opens the door for Microsoft's own franchises to like get some of the thunder on those off years. Like, oh, let's announce a huge Halo expansion. Let's put out, a Quake reboot or Gear 6 or something like that. Like You're not having to you're not cannibalizing your own sales because you own Call of Duty. Call of Duty's going to run roughshod over everything.
Especially if they
And it's
support
just,
it over 2 years plus Warzone with
yeah,
that, right? Like,
we've seen it for enough years now, and like that frees up a bunch of the support studios. Also, Activision itself is basically just Call of Duty at this point.
yeah,
They have like 8 support studios on the Call of Duty franchise.
yeah,
That's not counting the 4 main developers.
yeah.
That is absurd to me. That's completely and totally absurd.
Raven's on that, right? Like Raven's
Yep.
kind of heading up Warzone.
So Raven is the Warzone studio. You have Infinity Ward, Treyarch, and Sledgehammer do Call of Duty campaigns and main releases, and then you have just every other studio is pretty much, it's either been absorbed by Blizzard or it's a Call of Duty support studio exclusively at this point.
Yeah,
including Toys for Bob.
yeah.
Sadly,
Man, that's the studio that I think deserves to make something. If this deal goes through, I hope Microsoft kind of takes them and kind of gives them a project to work on. Like I don't know. They did so good with Crash and Spyro. I wonder if you gave them something like Banjo, if people would be happy, you know?
Banjo or Viva Pinata.
Yeah. Don't forget Voodoo Vince, Phil's favorite platformer.
God, if I get fucking Voodoo Vince before I get a classic rare property back, I might actually scream.
We already got a classic rare property. Battletoads came out.
I don't know. Like I find myself in this really weird spot of I just don't care if this passes or not at this point.
Yeah.
Like I have my own concerns about like regulations and about like should corporations be allowed to make $68 billion purchases? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
But I just think of like I just keep thinking back to like how you could spend this money so much more effectively and still get everything you want. Like it's hard for me to see what you get from this that you wouldn't get from Sega. Because Sega, you get mobile. They put plenty of their games on mobile. They also own Rovio now, or are about to.
Yeah.
They clearly have a lot of Japanese studios that Phil wants. Phil has stated that he wants Japanese studios under the Xbox brand. That solves your problem right there. And you would also have 2 of the best known brands with the Like a Dragon series and the Persona series, as well as anything else Atlas puts out. So like Soul Hackers and Metaphor is coming, obviously Shin Megami Tensei.
My thing too is it really conquers something that Xbox really needs is the kids market with Sonic and Super Monkey Ball and revive Billy Hatcher. I don't care.
I mean, you've got these smaller properties too that can be like your, like, for lack of better terminology, your filler. But like you look at games that you can do in mobile, like Choo Choo Rocket, bring that back.
Yeah, why not?
Bring Choo Choo Rocket back. You've got Puyo Puyo, that falls underneath this umbrella. Billy Hatcher, obviously, Crazy Taxi, you could revive on mobile. I know they tried doing it on mobile before. Like I don't think Crazy Taxi really works on consoles in today's day and age, but why not reimagine that on mobile?
Yeah.
You, like you said, you got the entire Sonic franchise, that can be brought in under this, and like
you have your MMO with Phantasy Star.
You got Phantasy Star Online. You've got don't sleep on 2 Point Campus and 2 Point Hospital. Total War. Total War is huge. Like huge.
I mean, don't forget Sega already developed Halo Wars 2.
They did work on Halo Wars 2, and then on top of all that, one that I think everybody has glossed over because it hasn't had a new installment in years and years and years, Virtua Fighter.
I thought you were going to say Alter Beast.
No. Virtua Fighter. I mean, you open the door, you have a fighting studio at that point, or if you rebuild it, at least you have a fighting studio that can make you Virtua Fighter or Killer Instinct. Virtua Fighter versus Killer Instinct could be a thing in the future. There's so many things there, and it's like I understand, and I think it's been over dramatized how difficult it would be to buy a Japanese company if you're Microsoft.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't be buying. The important thing is you would not be buying all of Sega Sammy. You would just be buying the gaming division. You would not be buying like any of the casino business or any of the other businesses that Sega Sammy owns. You would only be buying the gaming division.
Yeah.
Also, they still have a pretty good presence in arcades, which I like.
Yeah.
Arcades are like making a small comeback, so I'm a big fan.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, like, so it's funny because we we have a pass to Chuck E. Cheese, like a summer pass, because I have kids, and they have a Halo
Mhm.
cabinet there. And I sit my son on my lap and just play the Halo cabinet. It's pretty funny.
I think it's funny, like when you look at this, you look at the products that they make, and like Sammy is a pachinko company. They're perfect for Konami. Them and Konami should
Mm-hmm.
merge. But it's funny when you look at this and you go, "Oh, that's funny," because they used to publish fighting games. They used to publish Guilty Gear back in the day.
Yeah.
But I just like I can't imagine that, and I mean like they do like amusement park stuff, and TMS is a part of it. Just like at a certain point, like only Sega would be sold off, and actual Sega.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of curious to see like if this doesn't go through. I mean, I think they'll try for Sega no matter what, but I think that this looks a lot better to regulators if like Activision fails.
Yeah.
And then Microsoft comes along like 12 to 18 months from now and is like, hey guys, we're back.
Yeah.
Japan is approving this. And like, I think that like the FTC and stuff would look at it and be like, oh, well, Japan approved it. It's a Japanese company. Like, why wouldn't we?
Yeah. The thing too is like the thing that Activision doesn't give Microsoft that Sega does is that foothold in Japan, right? That they've been so much looking for and for so long, right? Like they've been trying to get into Japan for so long. And like this is like the best they've done, but like still, like they're still viewed as like an American company, whereas PlayStation is the
Yeah.
worldwide company, Nintendo's a worldwide company, and Microsoft is just an American company, right? And I mean they've tried. Like I mean, Lost Odyssey is one of my favorite games ever on Xbox,
Yeah.
and even something like that, or Blue Dragon, or what was the other one that they Infinite Undiscovery and Last Remnant from Square, and
Oh my God. I couldn't even tell you. Yeah.
Eternal Sonata was another one that was pretty good. Like they tried. They really tried.
They really tried in the 360 era, and I think they were just like so bummed out with how it didn't go. And I mean, if Phil had been in charge then, I think things would have been different.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of gotten his wish having a Japanese studio with Tango,
Yeah.
but you can only do so much. Like Tango was founded by Shinji Mikami to be a horror studio, and then they went and basically made Hi-Fi Rush.
Yeah.
It's rumored they're making a JRPG now.
Yeah.
Like they are clearly branching out from being just a horror studio, and like I think that this would enable them to, I mean, still keep doing what you want, because that seems to be Phil's whole thing, but also like, the pressure's not really on you as much to have to put out a JRPG. You can have a horror team.
Yeah.
You can work in conjunction with some of these. You want to make a JRPG? Why don't we get some guys from Atlas in here to advise you?
Yeah. And like especially with how big horror is right now, like
Mhm.
you know.
I mean, if you did Sega, you would also own like Alone in the Dark.
Yeah.
So I think there's possibilities there, but I really do think that no matter how big the publisher is, it's going to be really hard to make the case that you should be allowed to buy Sega if the Activision deal goes through.
Yeah.
Even if the FTC doesn't look at it as much, Japan's going to look at it and be like, I don't really know about this.
Yeah. Plus, like,
and like rightfully so, right?
Yeah. Plus, like, Japan's honor system, like they don't really like selling outside. Japanese companies don't really like selling to companies outside of Japan anyway. Like so they kind of have that.
Yeah,
although like
I think that like Sega seems to have a little bit of a different view on this, just judging by the comments they made to Bloomberg last week.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that hey, we have this really great partnership going. We have tech sharing going on, and we they have these Game Pass deals and stuff, and we feel like we're treated better, like treated as equals by Microsoft as opposed to like Sony and Nintendo.
Yeah.
Which really surprised me to hear about Nintendo, by the way. Because, and I don't know if that's just like, oh, well, being nice, because we don't know how far that talks got with Sega, but they had an acquisition deck.
Yeah,
we know that much, and we don't know how far that progressed. Like that could have been something huge, or just this isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah. So that's a really interesting thing that we could probably revisit if this doesn't go through.
Yeah,
where
I would personally say like if this doesn't go through, I would expect to hear like within the next 12 months
yeah.
we've entered into an agreement to buy Sega.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, money talks, right?
Money talks.
So,
And that's the thing is they said, we have no intention of selling. We've heard that before.
mhm.
Looking at you, Bungie.
Yeah.
Things changed not even a year and a half later. So
Yeah.
I think that, if that doesn't go through, you have that to look at. And then I think just the thing that we're all wondering about is like, what are the studios that they were talking about? Like, what deals possibly fell through? Like, you got to assume Sega's probably one of the ones that has fallen through.
Yeah.
Just like pure assumption, no basis for it. I'm just assuming. And if you're talking studios, like, I got to think that Certain Affinity has basically been promised we're bringing you into the fold.
Yeah. I mean, Certain Affinity. Yeah. I mean that I'm actually shocked they haven't been purchased already, unless Max
Mhm.
Hoberman is so dead set on being independent. But
Which I mean, he very well may be, and I'd be totally okay with that.
yeah.
Just don't let this turn into another BioWare situation
Yeah. Oh,
when they
yeah.
do so much work on two of your three biggest IPs.
Yeah.
Like, don't do this.
Yeah.
And they're supposedly making the battle royale for you, and they're going to take over Halo multiplayer. Like, just don't do this.
Yeah.
Don't do this.
Yeah. It's it'll be interesting to see.
It's a choice.
It's sure is.
So yeah, I'm interested to see what the fallout is over the next couple months.
Yeah.
Regardless if this goes through or not.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, Josh? We've been going for almost close
We've
to
been going for a long
yeah.
time, and we probably could go longer.
Yeah.
But no, I think this is a pretty like comprehensive like rundown of like all the stories that came out of it. And I mean, without trying to take like any sides.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of with you though. Like, I kind of just want this to be over with either way.
Yeah.
I've always been of the opinion that Microsoft doesn't really need ABK in terms of like console space. If they're looking for mobile, they can go find someone, I'm sure. But like,
I understand the mobile argument, but like you cannot tell me that it's worth spending 68 billion to get the makers of Candy Crush.
right. So
Like I would understand like, oh, if you're making the argument of, well, look at the mobile properties that Blizzard has, Diablo Immortal, which we're not going to talk about, Hearthstone and things like that. There's the opportunity maybe you resurrect Heroes of the Storm, or you make an Overwatch mobile or something, make an Overwatch tactical shooter on mobile.
mm-hmm.
Like there are possibilities here, maybe a StarCraft mobile. Like there are opportunities there. But, in Call of Duty mobile, but like okay, like I guess that's an interesting lineup, but like I still don't know what your strategy with mobile is. I don't think anybody does, because you're just now showing interest in mobile. We've been trying to like people like Epic have been trying to get y'all interested for a decade now.
Yeah.
So
I
who knows?
I have one final question for you, Josh. If this does fall through, regardless of if you care about it or not, do you think
Mhm.
this makes Microsoft look bad in any way?
I mean, I think they look bad, because I think to a lot of people who are following this, who maybe are not Xbox fans, it looks like a hostile takeover. Just like, oh, somebody who's worth $1 trillion is coming in and buying $1 billion company, right? And I think that people are right to be a little skeptical and be a little gun shy after the Bethesda incident of, oh, Starfield is now suddenly exclusive. Like, well, kind of the same thing with you guys. Like, it was just announced as coming to, next gen consoles and PC the same way that Deathloop and Ghostwire were, and then, oh, all of a sudden those are exclusive.
Yeah.
I'm still not ruling out seeing Starfield at some point come to PlayStation, be a couple years from now, or maybe a next gen upgrade. But I think it's all going to do in how do Game Pass sales respond, how do players respond. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I do think that if this falls through, I think it actually might like make them look a little bit better if this falls through, because there is a limit to what you can do.
Yeah.
I think that's the
And
most important thing to set that now,
mm-hmm.
because then there's that expectation. Like, yeah, making a purchase like 10 billion is fine.
Yeah.
But this, and I've said it from the beginning, I think this is a step too far. I don't see any reason why you need this or why you're paying that much money for it. There are way better ways to spend this money and keep your reputation intact.
Mm-hmm.
But like, because of how you're handling, and I understand like it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, you need exclusives for your platform, and you're spending all this money to get those. but you're crucified if you don't put them on everything, no matter if you buy them or not.
Yeah.
So
I also think that they've learned a lot. This leadership team has learned a lot over the course of the last 2.5 years, right? In terms of
yeah, I'll agree with that.
communication and the Redfall situation and
Yeah.
showing games and announcing games too early and all kinds of things. And I think this is just, whether this goes through or not, they've learned a lot through this acquisition, and I think how they proceed with studios moving forward, whether it's someone like IOI or even the Sega thing that we kind of talked about, I think you're going to see some things change in terms of how they announce it or how they go about doing the acquisition, or you know what I mean. I just feel like this ABK thing, even from day one, they made a whole website dedicated to this acquisition, and and it was just
Mm-hmm.
kind of if this doesn't happen, I think that's a big kind of, okay, we got to take a step back and take a look at this. And maybe they already have too internally, right? I'm sure they have contingency plans, right? I'm sure, but
Oh, they absolutely have contingency plans,
yeah,
and like I said, I think Sega is the contingency plan. But I mean, I still argue Sega's the bigger prize.
yeah,
I think Sega's more valuable
yeah.
to what Xbox wants to do as a brand. I think that they're infinitely the better option. I think that buying some smaller studios, and I'm not even going to mention IOI. I think Thunderful and Supergiant advance the Xbox cause in a lot of ways too.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of exemplify those. We want to buy smaller teams and build them up, and we saw how what was it, Ninja Theory kind of ballooned. 20-ish people made Senua's Sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Senua Saga is being made by 85,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah. Plus, they have Project Mara
That's
in the works too at some point.
they have so many things that they've announced that are not out.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have over 100 people working at that studio.
Yeah.
That probably doesn't happen without the Xbox acquisition. We've seen a couple of other studios go on hiring sprees, right? In Exile has 2 offices, Undead Labs has 2 or 3 offices. Those teams are staffing up. They have there's multiple games in the works at In Exile and at Obsidian and all these other places. You're able to sustain these smaller teams within these studios to make other games, and that's the Xbox I want us to see more of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see us buying. I don't want to see an Xbox that's buying, billion-dollar franchises and billion-dollar publishers.
Yeah.
I want to get back to how excited that we all were to see that, we may be less than jazzed that Obsidian and Double Fine are going to be exclusive studios, but they're going to have the funding they've never had before.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make the argument, if you want to play those games that badly, there is a $250 console you can go buy.
Mm-hmm. And
there is an Xbox Series S you can go buy and play those games.
Yeah. And like you said, building up smaller studios like Ninja Theory and even someone like that, I think your billion-dollar franchises need to be Halo, need to be Gears, and then you supplement your top tier titles
Yep.
with these tiered approaches like Psychonauts and
and that's one of the things that I think that Microsoft has actually done really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
Is they've had the smaller games.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't had the big games.
Yeah.
Is the problem. But you look at some of this. We talked about 2020 earlier, and we talked about a lot of the games there. We talked about some of the ones in 2021. Those are bigger. Those are big games, but those are, in any other year, I think Flight Sim and Age of Empires become supplemental games.
Yeah.
And in that year, they really were. That was great. Your headliners were Forza and Halo, but you had Psychonauts 2, you had Flight Sim, you had Age of Empires. And it's if we can just get to a point where we're consistently releasing a couple smaller games and a couple big games a year.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Great. Next year looks, the next 12 months, next 12 to 18 months looks really great based off what we saw at the showcase. Right? I would take 1 or 2 smaller games, and Matt Booty has already said, and Phil Spencer has said, we haven't shown everything that's going to come out in 2024.
Right. Which is great for Xbox.
It's great, but I mean, if we can strike a good balance, maybe you got a couple smaller games, ready to go, or maybe Contraband suddenly becomes ready. great. Like those are that and like Towerborn are supplemental games to your Avowed and your Fable and, you know, Gear 6 or Horizon 6, whatever comes out, you know, Starfield DLCs, you know.
Yep.
So,
yep. I agree.
And I guess I kind of worry that like if Activision Blizzard goes through, like that's going to screw up some of these plans they've worked for years to execute.
Yeah.
Because now you have to plan around Call of Duty.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to plan around World of Warcraft expansions and, you know, Diablo seasons and things like that. You have to plan around some of these things. You're going to have to market Diablo expansions, which you probably are already going to do anyways because you have the marketing rights to it. But
yeah,
you have to plan around Call of Duty. That's a pretty big thing to have to plan around.
Yeah. Yeah.
November is basically closed off like any year that you want to release those games.
Yeah, but I mean, at that point though, you could look at like Q1 and Q2, like Sony's been doing, and release your first party stuff within that window, right? Or like,
which they should be doing anyways. But
and then keep like Q4 for Forza and Call of Duty. Like Forza seems to be the fall anyway, right? So
yeah, I think I don't know. I think that this is going to get sillier before it gets better, no matter what happens.
Yeah, and I'll stop there because like we could talk another hour about how they.
Well, we'll talk in circles.
Yeah, so, but Josh, we're gonna end it there. Well, we're gonna end it there. I want to thank everybody for watching and or listening to this kickoff episode of Xbox Arsenal. Josh, as always, thank you for your time tonight. Where can we find you?
Right now you can still find me on Twitter at Josh_Finn, 2 N's.
Yeah. For now.
For now.
Yeah. You can find me at I am Corey HD on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me also hosting the Boss Rush podcast every Monday. You can also find me on Nintendo Pow Block, which is hitting episode 350 this week. So it's a milestone. Why you ask? I don't know. You can find all of our content on bossrush.net. Subscribe to YouTube. Support us on Patreon. I want to thank everyone for watching and or listening. And until next time, we love you. Goodbye. If you want to be a Patreon producer, head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/bossrushmedia, and find out which tier is right for you. Our Patreon producers at the $5 tier or higher for this month are Adriel Munger, Austin Campbell, Celeste Roberts, Christian S., Sana Dirrig, Francisco Santillan, and Rebecca Jewell. Thank you for your continued support.